And we are live with today's pre-show for the 2/20/11-02 study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome aboard. If you are just getting here, it's time to settle in. We got about 10 minutes to go until the top of the hour. That's when we get started. In the meantime, I am setting up the studio. Should probably turn off the fan that is probably making some light appear odd in the final video. We'll get that done. Should have done that earlier, but that's why we have a pre-show. We are recording. There's the Cylons at the bottom right there. Stream looks good. Caching numbers are good. We've got data rates are good. Everything looks good. We'll have to see how it goes. Hello, chat room. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for joining us live. If you are watching this on the replay, you can also hang out with us as well as we go through it. There's always something going on. Oh, it was only a couple days ago we did our Core 1 study group, so now we're back with the Core 2 study group. And we're near the end of the month, or the end of the week, rather. We got more before the end of the month, is what I wanted to say. We've got Network Plus next week and Security Plus the week after that. So there's always an event, always a thing going on. We've got last check of everything here. That looks good. Hope everybody's doing well. In our first hour today, I've got questions for you, so stick around for that. We're going to do Q&A, and I guess we could even set some things up so that you could see things on the screen right now. Let's see what I can do with it. Here we go. We'll just do that. And now you can do this by, you can actually put your virtual pin in our map of the world by visiting the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to put the pin in the map wherever you happen to be. So folks already doing this. We've got a couple in North America or even the U.S. And some folks in the chat room are checking in. We got folks here from San Antonio and Hamburg, Germany. Salt Lake City, Utah is here. Welcome. Tennessee's checking in. Thanks for being here. We always have new questions every month with these. So that's always fun. So stick around for this. You'll see questions you haven't seen before. Boston's here, Chicago, and West Africa, and Maryland, and Antarctica, who's clearly working on the gate. They're stationed there for the gate. We all know what that's about. St. Petersburg, you don't mention which one it is, but we'll probably say it's the one in Florida. We'll go with that. There's the UK and South Africa. There's folks in the chat room asking, hey, why don't you do a Linux Plus course? I think you could just put this as why can't you do a fill in the blank course? Like anything can go in that hook. And I'd love to do a Linux course. That'd be fun. Of any kind, whether it's Linux Plus or Red Hat, or I guess it's really the two big ones. Those would be fun to do, but it's really more about it's about physics. It's about a time motion study of how much time is available to do anything. I have a list of probably 10 courses that I would like to do, but it's all about finding the right one at the right time and rolling it out. Is what it's about. It does take some time to do a course. It's remarkable how much time goes into producing one single course. And it seems like these courses, they rotate through every 3.5 years. It seems like as soon as you finish it, you're back to updating it again because you're rotating others through. Now, Microsoft courses might be interesting to do because those do tend to time out, but only after the product has naturally run its course. It's naturally no longer being sold or supported. Well, that's different, but the CompTIAs tend to be updated about every 3 years, which is just about right as far as technology is concerned. Because right about at the 3-year mark, there's some old things you could probably roll out. There's some new things you could probably roll in. So there you go. That's sort of how it works. Folks checking in from Orlando, just around the corner. Got folks in Fort Worth, Texas, and Grand Prairie, Texas. Detroit is here. Tacoma, Washington. We got Indiana, more Texas. We got folks checking in from everywhere. Thanks for being here. There's the Canadians. Hello, Toronto. Thank you for being here. I'll let Mrs. Professor Messer know. It's always good when the folks up north check in. The family, the kinfolk are checking in from Canada. There's South Georgia. That's a big place, South Georgia. There's a lot in South Georgia, or very little across a very large area. I guess it depends on how you look at it. I grew up in North Florida, so a similar scenario. It's a somewhat rural, as they say. Thanks for being here, Miami and New Jersey and East Texas and Athens, Georgia. Nairobi, Kenya is here. North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina. And now we get to have the argument about barbecue. That's sort of where that goes. Tay in the chat room says, thanks to you, Professor, I'm now A+ certified. Well, you took the exam, so it's thanks to you. You are A+ certified. Congratulations on that. That's fantastic. That's always good to hear. Somebody crushes their exam, gets that certification, puts it in their pocket, and you're now prepared. You're now ready to go and get things done. Hey, more people in the middle of the Atlantic. That's great. I was going to say Madagascar, but it's too far north, isn't it? Madagascar's down there. We'll see how things go with the next set. How are we doing on time? We got about 3.5 minutes left until we get started. And then we are going to do Q&A for the A+ exam. Oh boy. There's all new, as I mentioned, all new questions this month. This is one where I usually do the questions about a week in advance, and these were done about 2 days ago. So I was a little behind. There's a lot going on right now. So I have everything on a very specific timer, a schedule. And it's all set up so that it happens now exactly when it's supposed to. I like to be a little bit faster with these, but that's the problem, isn't it? It's all about finding the right time to do that. But so far it's working out. I spend a lot of time in the studio. A lot of what we're doing right now is updates for the Network Plus course, because Network Plus is due to be updated next month or so. Well, it's definitely going to be released next month. My course will be available next month, but there's some other things I'm working on along with Network Plus. So we're trying to get all of those things together and finished and shoot some things. And so there's a lot of studio time lately. We're working on it. We're trying to get it to happen. It's coming together nicely. That's one of the nice things when you're creating a new course. I always say once I finish a course, well, that was the best one we ever did. And then I do the next course. Oh, that one was the best one we ever did. So that is always good to have that. Okay. Next on the list is our final check. Things look good with internet. Cameras are all up and running. We are recording just fine here. I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we're in super good shape. Thanks for being in the chat room and checking in from wherever you happen to be. Thanks for joining us. We always like doing these live streams. You never know how things are going to go when you're setting up. I usually set this up about an hour before we go live. And that's always fun. What's my keyboard? The keyboard and mouse, since this is the kind of the pre-show, always get the interesting conversation. You can see the keyboard's a little funky. It's a little weird. It's a little askew. It's a Logitech. What is this Logitech version? It is the Logitech. Glad you asked. It's I can't even read it because the lights in here are just awful. Forget. Oh, you know what we could do? We could bring up the Logitech app. Let's bring up the app, everybody. That's not going to cause a problem at all, is it? We got too many apps. Is it called the Logitech Options? It is called the Logitech Options. It doesn't even tell me what version. It puts a nice picture of the keyboard on the screen, but that doesn't help me. It doesn't really provide me with a lot of details here about what this is. But it's a super nice keyboard. I do like it. The keyboard and the mouse are all very important to me. The keyboard probably the most because there's so much typing that goes on. Let's get this screen up and running. Let's get this set up with our keynote. Let's hit the big play button. Looks good, looks good, looks good. Top of the hour is here. Things look great on this side. I think it's time to do a live stream, everybody. What do you think? I think so too. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2024 Professor Messer 2201102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see just how much you happen to know about these topics. We're going to cover a lot of things on our list, starting with this right here. If you would like to participate, you can pop open a new browser window, or at least we hope you do, and go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to join us and answer questions. I'm going to put some questions up on the screen, and we're going to see how well we do with those. In fact, if you go there right now, there will be a question that is from a previous study group. We call this our rewind question. It's our first question of the day, and it is a question that, generally speaking, is one you may have seen before on a previous study group. It's our only brand new or only non-brand new question of the month. The study group rewind question of the month asks this: a company uses a proxy to provide network security. Which of the following should be used to configure this setting in the Windows control panel? Is it Internet Options, Computer Management, Performance, Data Usage, or Printer Properties? Now, our standing rule for the study group is that you answer the questions online by visiting professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We are instead going to answer and work through all of these using this link that is on your screen. That might help things out. If you are someone who is working along their way to figure out what the answer is, we don't want to blurt it out in the chat room. You want to follow that link at professormesser.com/QA. And we're going to come back to that question in just a bit. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We like to do one of these study groups for the Core 2 every month. And of course, we have a lot that you could work through to be able to find, well, when you start working through all of our social media, all of our videos on YouTube, there's a lot to find. And you can find it very easily by typing in the name of that social media site right after professormesser.com. So if you wanted to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and why wouldn't you want to do that? You go to professormesser.com/YouTube. If you would like our daily A+ pop quiz question, you can get those sent to your email inbox by following the links on the main Professor Messer website, or you can simply find them on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or on Instagram by typing in professormesser.com/Twitter/LinkedIn or /Instagram. It can't be more difficult than that. That's pretty easy. So just think of the place you would like to find us. You type in professormesser.com/ and the name of that location, and we're probably there waiting on you. Sometime in this first hour of the study group, I'm going to give you instructions on how you could earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. This is something that is required by CompTIA if you are using CEUs to renew your certification. So that's one of those examples where you really do need to go look and see how you're planning to renew. This also is something that obviously would only apply if you have already earned your certification and you're using this to renew. You can't collect CEUs until you are certified. So another thing to keep in mind, that will be sometime during this first hour. Just keep an ear out for that. Today, we're going to talk about questions and answers that come directly from the 2201102 exam objectives. These objectives were released on April the 20th of 2022, and we expect this exam to be around somewhere until November-ish of 2025. We will have better idea on the final specific dates of that once we get closer. But as we sit here in May of 2024, you've got well over a year before you even have to start worrying about that. The 2201102 exam is a 90-minute exam, and you need to score a 700 on a scale between 100 and 900. So you've got a few choices there to go with. Regardless of when you take this exam and pass both your A+ Core 1 and A+ Core 2, you are certified for 3 years from the day that you earn that certification. So it really doesn't matter when they retire the question and answers. Once you've already passed the exams, changing the questions and answers doesn't really matter to you. All you need to worry about is your expiration date for your 3-year renewal cycle, and that's an important one to keep in mind. Today, we're going to talk about topics that come from the 2011-02 exam. Those topics are operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, operational procedures, and potpourri. We have quite a few questions to go through. I try to hit questions in each of those very broad categories, so we will step through them during this live stream. Of course, we have a video replay of this available immediately afterwards on YouTube, but we also create an audio-only podcast version of this. You can go to professormesser.com/podcast, and you can subscribe to our A+, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus study groups, and then they just magically appear in your favorite podcast listening program. If you prefer a streaming service like Spotify, then you can go out to Spotify and you can search for Professor Messer there, and you'll find that our podcasts are also listed on those services. If there's a service you would like us added to, just let me know, and I'll be glad to put it into the mix. And about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, hi Lori, she's watching the replay of this. She's going through and putting timestamps in for all of our video content for this 1 to 2 hour session. So this is one where this is the best way to really put these timestamps in. They don't happen automatically. There's no magic behind it. It's hard work to be able to put these in, and we appreciate Lori listening to this whole thing and putting those in. You can go back years on these study groups to find these timestamps, so this might be something very useful if you're planning and studying for your exam and you're watching some of our previous study group replays. Also let you know that when we're not here on the live stream, we're usually hanging out in our Discord. You can visit us there by going to professormesser.com/discord. And no surprise there. There's also an icon at the upper right hand of the website. If you're looking for an easy way to find that, there's an icon there at the top you can find, and click on that to join the Discord as well. It's a great place not only to check in with other people taking their exams, but there's usually people hanging out who are already A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus certified, and a lot of people are there to help answer questions or just to create an ad hoc study session where you can stream videos or talk back and forth about questions from the exam. It's all on our Discord, and it's absolutely free. Go to professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you're going to need to take the A+ exam, and that A+ exam is one that you have to pay for. There are some costs associated with it, but I'd like to take a little bit of money off the top of that so that you can get a discount on this. You could certainly go to the CompTIA website and pay full price if you'd like to, or if you're in the US or Canada, you can visit professormesser.com/vouchers, and there are discounted vouchers already there. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need a discount number. You don't have to put any special extensions into your browser. They're just already discounted. You can visit our website for those, and if you purchase the voucher on professormesser.com, I'll give you even something that you can't get anywhere else. It's our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus CompTIA Exam Hacks ebook. It is one that gives you tips and tricks for not only the study process, but I give you some tips and tricks that might help you during the exam get you a few extra points. This is a compilation of a series of life hacks I've accumulated over time, something that maybe can help you for the exam. You can find all of that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier. The question was, a company uses a proxy to provide network security. Which of the following should be used to configure this setting in the Windows control panel? Is it Internet Options, Computer Management, Performance, Data Usage, or Printer Properties? Well, a lot of you have already locked in your answers, so let's close the poll and see how you did. 88% of you say the answer is Internet Options, 10% of you say it's Computer Management, and then less than 1% for the remaining Performance, Data Usage, and Printer Properties options. The proxy settings in that configuration inside of Windows allow you to configure all of the proxy settings necessary to be able to use those proxies. Proxies are a middleman between you and another network. And in the case of Windows, there may be times, and depending on what proxy you're using, there may be times when you have to manually or specifically configure a proxy inside of your Windows configuration. This would not be a transparent proxy. This would be a very explicit proxy that you have to configure and put into the middle of your conversation. And you would do that. There's settings inside the control panel that allow you to do that. Internet options, connections, and LAN settings would allow you to view that. This gives you a place where you can configure all of these proxy configurations if it's required. There are people that will set up proxies inside of their networks that don't need special configurations in the operating system. Those are transparent proxies. But if you're not using a transparent proxy, it will need to be configured specifically in the operating system. And generally speaking, we're moving very rapidly away from proxies. There's a lot of negatives to using proxies from a performance and management perspective. Today's more modern next generation firewalls tend to replace a lot of the functionality that we used to use inside of these proxies. So maybe this is something that you will not have to do quite as much going forward into the future. Well, the proxy settings are indeed in the Internet options selection. So those of you that selected, the 88% of you that selected Internet options, not a difficult question to start things off, but it wasn't intended to be. We wanted to be sure you're able to get into the connection, get into answering the questions, selecting it, and it looks like everything's working fine for you from that side. Computer management gives you some number of different options for configuring settings within your Windows config, but proxy settings are not inside of the computer management screen. And as you've probably seen with less than 1%, performance, data usage, and printer properties are also not where you would find the proxy settings. All of those are contained within Internet options. Well, you did well with that one, but I'm wondering how well you would do with a performance-based question. For those of you that have not taken a CompTIA exam before, one of the things you may not realize is the first handful of questions you get on your exam will not be multiple choice. So the question we just did was a multiple choice question. There was a question and there were 5 different options to choose from in this particular example, which means even if you didn't know the answer, you still had a 20% chance of getting it right just because you guessed at it. Well, CompTIA realizes that may not be the best way to evaluate how much you really know about a topic. So at the very beginning of the exam, they will ask you questions that are not in a multiple choice format. Now, the good part, of course, is that you already know that all of the questions on the exam are going to be pulled directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. But instead of asking you something that is multiple choice, CompTIA will ask you something that will be a matching question or a fill-in-the-blank question, or you have to drag and drop things into a particular order. It's really the same information that you are compiling in your brain to get through the multiple choice questions. They're just asking the question in a different way. So I have for you a performance-based question, and our performance-based question of the month is one that is kind of a drag and drop, if you will. It's a restructuring or a recategorization of putting malware removal best practices in their 7-step order as it is related in the CompTIA exam objectives. So we'll have to see how well you know the selection for these. And of course, we have on the screen all 7 malware removal best practices listed, but they're in the wrong order. The order on the screen shows quarantine infected systems, identify malware symptoms, educate the end user, schedule scans and run updates, enable system restore, disable system restore, and remediate. So obviously these are not in the right order. I want to know what order they should really be in. You don't have to type the whole thing out. It's a fill in the blank online. If you already think they're in the correct order, then you would simply put A, B, C, D, E, F, G and submit that one. But as a tip, really it's not much of a tip, they're not in that order currently. You're going to have to unscramble the exact order that you would use here and be able to determine what the correct order really should be. The malware removal process is part of the exam objectives. I think, as we've already mentioned in the course, and as you've probably seen if you've already been working in a place that handles malware, you know there really is not a removal process. The removal process is you delete everything on the system and you restore from an image or a known good backup. So that's really how people remove malware. But there might be occasions where there is a piece of information on that computer that you need to get to. The malware, for whatever reason, may have corrupted the boot process or made it difficult to gain access to that system. So perhaps we may want to remove the malware enough that we are now able to get access to that system and retrieve important files that you otherwise would not have access to. At which time, I'm fully expecting that most people would delete everything on that computer and start fresh from a known good backup or from a known good image. But these are important to know in case you are put into that position where, well, we can't re-image that system. I want you to go through and get at least enough access to remove those important files from the system. So there is a good reason for doing this. There's also bad reasons for doing this. So make sure you're doing it in the right way. A number of you are putting your answers in right now. I'm watching all of those as they are accumulating, as they're going through the screen. This is something that is a new question every month. So it's not something you can easily Google, and certainly you should not be looking at the exam objectives for this. You should see if you can put them in the order. See if you really remember these. I think that's the real key with the performance-based questions. There are some questions in the chat room about are these questions worth more or less than the multiple choice-based questions? And the answer is nobody knows. And there's no way to ever tell. So you could make an argument that performance-based questions are absolutely worth more than multiple choice. You could also make an argument that the performance-based questions are worth way less than multiple choice. And we could argue about that for days and weeks and years. And at the end of that, none of us would have any way to justify our position because CompTIA tells you nothing about the scoring process. I will tell you that there are people that have taken their entire exam. They've skipped over every performance-based question. They only answered multiple choice questions and they still passed the exam. So you can take from that what you will, but that's one of those times where it may be interesting to break down for your exam what the points are. You could try to, but it's going to be very different for someone else. Let's see how you did with this question. We'll start with the very first malware removal step and that best practices that are in the exam objectives, specifically section 3.3. And if you wanted to reference my video on this, the video name is aptly called Removing Malware. The first thing you would want to do is the second thing that was on our list, which is identify malware symptoms. You obviously don't need to remove malware unless a system actually has malware. And one of the best ways to do that is to notice that something is a little bit odd with the system. Maybe you're getting a lot of pop-ups. Maybe it's very slow. Maybe you're seeing applications running on the desktop that don't look quite right. That would be a clue that might give you a little bit of pause to make you think, there might be malware on the system. I have identified some malware symptoms. Once you identify malware symptoms, there's a few things that we need to do very quickly. And one of the best things to do right away is to quarantine the system. You need to make sure that that system is disconnected from the network, that you've unplugged any USB drives, that nothing can connect to that. You've disabled the wireless adapter. You've completely removed this system from the rest of the world. You are off the grid with this particular computer. That's because there are some types of malware that are very good at hopping from one system to another. And in the case of something like a worm, which is certainly a very, very malicious and very bad form of malware, a worm is able to hop from system to system automatically. Fortunately, we don't run into a lot of worms, but if you happen to click the wrong thing on the screen or you happen to run an executable accidentally, it's certainly possible that you could then launch a process that then goes out to the network and infects another system. So getting it disconnected from the network is an important step, and that's what you should do right after you notice there are symptoms, is to quarantine the infected system. Third on our list is that we want to disable system restore. System restore is a process of remembering configuration changes so that if later on, if you wanted to revert back to a previous configuration, you could do that. And it's a fantastic functionality. It has saved my bacon quite a number of times. But what the malware authors will do is they will not only infect your currently running system, they will also infect all of your system restore points. So that way, even if you restore from a system restore because you think, I can fix this, I'll simply go back in time to last week when I didn't have this malware. Well, it's too late. The malware authors have already infected that restore point, and you can roll back your configuration to last week, but you're simply rolling back and installing the malware all over again. So disabling system restore will delete all of your restore points, making sure that there's no way for someone later on to accidentally reinfect this machine. Third on the list, or fourth on the list, is now we need to remediate, which is kind of a fancy way to say we get rid of the malware. We remove it, we delete it, we clean it, we do whatever we have to do to remove that malware from our system. All malware works in different ways. There is not one single way to remediate a system. It may be as simple as deleting a file. It may be as simple as changing something in a startup folder, or it may require a lot of work by going into your registry and changing things with a DLL and removing files from a program directory and changing things that have already been modified in your system files. It can be very, very complex. So the remediation process is a single step here, but indeed, this is one that may take the most amount of time in this entire process. Right after the remediation is complete, we can think about scheduling some scans and running updates so that we can keep this system always up to date with the latest anti-malware signatures. We can make sure that the system is protected if we happen to run into any malware in the future. And then we have, after that's done, we can re-enable system restore. Obviously, we won't have any restore points to pull from, but as we go forward, now that we feel that this system is clean, we've got updates, we've now made sure the malware is no longer on the system, or as well as we think we know that the malware is on that system, we can now re-enable that system restore functionality so that we can use that for changing the restore points and reverting back to restore point if we need to in the future. And then lastly, now that we've gone through that entire process, it's a good idea to sit down with the end user and talk about how that malware might have gotten onto the system. Did they run an executable? Did they download an application? Was this an attachment inside of an email message? How did this malware get on this computer? And there are some good best practices you can go through with your end users to talk to them about what you can click, what you can't click, and if you ever have questions, what you should do. So hopefully educating the end user is something that will resolve this for any future instances, or at least maybe get you a phone call so that you can come have a look at what they've found to see if it really is malware or not. Those are the malware removal best practices. We need to quarantine infected systems, identify malware symptoms, quarantine infected systems, disable system restore, remediate, schedule scans and run updates, enable system restore, and educate the end user. Those are the answers we were looking for in this case. Hopefully, this gives you an idea of what you can do if you need to get into a system that has been infected with malware. Although I will stay with my tried and true, because even if you go through this entire process of removing the malware, there's still no guarantee that you got 100% of the malware off your system. You still will never know. Yeah, you think you cleaned everything. And if you talk to someone who does this, they'll tell you, oh, I clean all the time. I get rid of everything. It's always gone once I go through the malware process. But how do you know? Isn't there something, couldn't there be something hidden in your registry? Could there be another application simply waiting for a certain date and time to reinfect your system? And the answer is, yeah, there could be. Absolutely, there could be. So there's no possible way for you to know 100% that you really have removed all the malware, which is why the tried and true, the best practice is to completely delete everything and load your system from the original media, from a known good backup, from a known good image, or from some other source. Ultimately, You need to know how to do both of those for the A+, and this might help you if you ever get into the malware removal process. Hopefully you did very well with that one. That was our performance-based question of the month, and an important one to know for your Core 2 exam. Let's shift gears back to a multiple choice based question. This question is one with some interesting text in it, and it asks, a website has posted this string of text next to a download link. And it's this big long string of letters and numbers that you can see on the screen. Which of the following best describes this information? Is that a session ID, a file header, an integrity check, a download counter, or a decryption key? So you have a few choices there. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. The question again asks, a website has posted this string of text next to a download link. And you can see it's a big long string of text. It's so big it doesn't even fit on my screen right here. The question is, which of the following best describes this information? Is it session ID, file header, integrity check, download counter, or decryption key? Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in what you think the answer might be. A lot of people getting their answers in quick. I wonder if this is another one where we really do know what this answer happened to be. We'll have to find out if we really know what the answer is to this one. Maybe this is one you've even run into. Maybe you've seen this on a download link. This would be a good one to have some familiarity with. So hopefully this is something that you are already familiar with and working through. Let's see how you did with this question. It asks, a website has posted this string of text next to a download link, and it's this long string of what appears to be a hexadecimal character. So it's everything from 0 through 9 and A through G. A through F on the screen. I've been writing too many IPv6 questions lately. Which of the following describes this information? Session ID, file header, integrity check, download counter, or decryption key? What did you say the answer was? Oh, we're a little torn on this one. We've got 3 good answers in this list. Integrity check has the plurality of the answers at 40% of the votes. Decryption key, though, right behind it at 30%. And the session ID has 17% of you answering session ID. File header came in at 9%, and download counter only came in at 2%. So if we go with at least not a majority, but maybe a plurality of what we have here, integrity check is the answer that we were looking for. Well, let's see if that really is. If we have a look at the answer page, this is hash verification is what we are looking at on the screen. This is one that you can use to verify a hash for a particular document, file, or any other object that you may be using inside of an operating system. You will often see these on download sites. So you go to download, for example, a Linux distribution, and this is an actual screenshot or copy and paste of the information you would find if you were going to download Ubuntu. And on the Ubuntu website, they give you this information. It shows if you're going to download this file, which is the desktop AMD64.ISO, there is this big SHA-256 hash right next to it. If you download this next file, which is a server for an AMD64.ISO platform, it has a different hash associated with, which makes sense because it is a different file. It's a different document. And ideally, if there's something different in the data that is input, you will get a very different hash as the output. So that is something you will see if you start to download. But how do you know once you downloaded the file if that hash matches the file that you downloaded? Well, you will need some type of application to be able to verify that. There's lots of hashing documents and hashing applications out there. I went out to the Microsoft Store and I simply looked for the hash checker. I did a hash. Really, I think I just searched for hash. And this was a free utility that came up. And all I have to do is drag and drop the file into this window and it will calculate for me what the hash is. And this one happens to be a SHA-256 hash, and you can see that it calculated that entire hash file. So now if you look at that hash file and you compare it to the hash file that was on the website, you can see that those two pieces of information are identical, which means that the file that I downloaded, which is the live server AMD64.ISO that is on my local computer, is exactly the same binary file as the one that is located on the web server out there. And this is a great way to check and make sure that you've downloaded the correct file, that no one has changed anything with that file in the meantime. It's a great way to verify the integrity of the data that you have already downloaded. So we do an integrity check of every packet coming through the network already. This is another, on top of that, a separate verification process to check the integrity. And it's one that you can do very, very quickly. It only takes a second to be able to check the hash information, to compile that hash information. And it becomes very, very easy to use. If you've ever seen that on a site, you're wondering, why are they putting a lot of numbers and letters next to it? That's what they're doing, is giving you a way to verify that download. It is an integrity check, and 40% of you did choose integrity check as the answer. You got that one absolutely correct. Now, we did have a large number of people, 30% of you said, oh, that's a decryption key, is what you would put there. And as many of you are probably thinking, why would you publicly post a decryption key on a website for someone to download? It defeats the purpose of encrypting it in the first place if anyone would be able to decrypt it. And that logic that you just stepped through certainly fits. There would be no reason to put a decryption key somewhere publicly when you are trying to make something private, something confidential. So that would not make much sense to have that as a decryption key, because all it does is just add another step to the process of trying to use this file. And at the end of it, it doesn't actually make anything more confidential. It doesn't actually encrypt anything very well, because everyone is able to decrypt it. We also have 17% of you that said it's a session ID. Session IDs aren't something that's usually shown on the screen. They're usually added to your system as a cookie. You usually don't see them unless you happen to have a cookie editing utility. That might be something you might be interested in doing. Go grab a well-known and well-documented cookie editor for your browser, and you can go in and see what's inside all these little cookies that get set when you visit a website, and you will most likely find a session ID inside of that cookie. But we don't tend to put session IDs on a web page, especially since everybody's going to have a different session ID. But in this case, on this website, everybody sees the same hash information on the screen. So therefore, it would not be a session ID. This would not also be a file header. There'd be really no reason to put the header of a file on a website. I'm not even sure what you would do with that. Obviously, many file headers do have magic numbers and things in the front of them that help us determine what type of file that happens to be. That's the programmer's term for it, is the magic number or the magic cookie, the magic information that's at the beginning of the file, which is really just to say, this is information we put at the very beginning of the file so that you know, is it a Word document? Is it a zip file? Is it a graphics file? And what type of graphics file? So you would not have a file header. That doesn't help you to put a bunch of hexadecimal file headers at the top of it. What would you even do with that? It's not very useful. So not a file header, and it is obviously not a download counter either, although that would be quite the download, wouldn't it? Be a lot of people downloading that particular one. We used to have download counters back in the day. Back in the early days of the internet, how many visitors did a page get? You could watch those numbers accumulate. Oh, we got 1,000 visitors on a website back when we had 2,000 people out on the internet. That's a little different now. We don't really track that publicly anymore. We should do that, right? We should go back to download counters and visit. No, we shouldn't. We should not put that on the screen. Not very useful. If you'd like to know, I'll be glad to tell you. We can talk about that. In this case, we did have 40% of you that got this question absolutely correct. Integrity check is the right answer. It is a hash file. We use it to make sure that the file that we've downloaded is identical to the file that exists on that web server. So a great thing to use if you're looking to check the integrity of a file. Let's do another question. Next on our list is this one. And this question asks, a technician would like to know the last time a Windows system was restarted. Which of the following would be the best source of this information? Would it be Task Scheduler, Event Viewer, Performance Monitor, Task Manager, or Control Panel System? It's got to be one of these. Now, those of you that are already working on a help desk, you already know this one cold, because this is where you start, because you've told the person, reboot your system, and then I'll call you and we'll troubleshoot the problem. And the first question you ask is, oh, did you reboot the system? They go, oh, yes, I did. I rebooted my system. Really, let's see how long the system's been up and running. Let's check the uptime of this Windows system. And you check it by visiting one of these: Task Scheduler, Event Viewer, Performance Monitor, Task Manager, or Control Panel System. If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen to submit your answer at professormesser.com/QA and see if you happen to know the answer to this one. I think we'll have a lot of people that know the answer to this one. It's also a great way to see, did they really reboot their computer? These days, it's kind of hard to even figure out if your system's even rebooting. So that's another one where we will kind of focus on what the answers are and where we can go with questions like this. Let's see if we know this one. A lot of people are still working on getting their answers in for this one, but we're going to jump ahead and see how we did. The question again asks, a technician would like to know the last time a Windows system was restarted. Which of the following would be the best source of this information? Is it Task Scheduler, Event Viewer, Performance Monitor, Task Manager, or Control Panel System? What would it be? Let's see what you think the answer is. We will stop the poll, and we can see that 64% say the answer is Event Viewer. We also have 21% that say Task Manager, 10% say Performance Monitor, 4% say Control Panel System, and then 0% say Task Scheduler. So what we want to know is what's going on this system. And if you happen to go into your computer, one of the first things when people have problems, you always ask, hey, have you rebooted your system? Have you turned it off and back on again? That's the running gag, right? And the reason we say that, of course, is because, well, it works. It fixes things. When you completely shut down and restart your computer fresh, very often it will resolve issues with your operating system and applications that are running inside of your operating system. But how do you know if somebody really did it? If they really went through the process? And one of the ways to do that is to have a look at the timestamps showing us uptime. And what I have on the screen is a copy of Task Manager. I'm over here in the Performance tab, the second tab over in Task Manager. And in Task Manager, you can see at the very bottom, we have an option or a listing of statistics for uptime. It's there underneath the utilization and speed and processes and threads and handles and things that you wonder what those numbers really mean. But right underneath is this number that says, here's how long this system has been up and running. So that's a very good example of where you can find information immediately, instantly, that can really tell you if the system was restarted or not. And then you can, well, we need to really restart the system and see if we can start it fresh to resolve this particular problem based on the numbers that we have here in uptime. And it's all contained within Task Manager, not our Event Viewer. You would think Event Viewer would be a good place to determine the last time a Windows system was restarted. And I guess you could use Event Viewer for that, but you would have to go back in time in the Event Viewer. If you've ever looked at the Event Viewer, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of information. You would have to somehow filter out when the last initialization of the operating system happened to be, and then you would have to calculate based on that timestamp of that log entry, how long has your system been running? Well, that's going to take me 5 minutes to be able to figure that out. Why don't I just pop open Task Manager and click on the Performance tab, and it will tell me immediately how long the system has been up and running. And that was really the question, because this is very common on the exam. Technically, both of those answers could get you that information, but that wasn't the question. The question asked, which of the following would be the best source of this information? And I would say the best source is the one that gets you the information the fastest and perhaps the most accurate in that particular view of the world. And in this case, Task Manager is the one that is the much faster than going through the process and using Event Viewer. Performance Monitor also does not show uptime information, so we would not use Performance Monitor for that. That's more of long-term statistical gathering. And Control Panel System doesn't show you uptime information either, although it does tell you what version of Windows you're using and the different configurations you have for memory and other settings. And then nobody chose Task Scheduler, which is able to automatically run different tasks on your system. It doesn't show you anything about the Windows startup. There's some folks in the chat room were even saying, yeah, but Task Manager, although it shows you that information, this isn't always accurate. Well, that's not entirely true either. I think a lot of people think it is not accurate, but as we've probably seen, especially with the latest versions of Windows, shutting down your Windows systems may not technically shut them all the way down. And that's why we often tell people you really need to restart from the very beginning and not just tell it to turn off and back on again, because the current versions of Windows will simply put it into a hibernate mode or a suspend mode. And then when you turn the system back on, it simply launches from where it left off. It never really restarted, so it never really changes the amount of uptime. It simply continues with the same uptime because indeed it has not been restarted. So I always tell people, make sure that you're going down the process of completely restarting the system, not just closing the panel and opening it back up again, not just hitting the off button, turning the off button back on again. That's a pretty important part of that. So another thing to think about, and keep that in mind if you get this question again, that the answer is actually Task Manager, and 21% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as you've probably seen already, this is a lot of information for a single exam. And you're right, it is a lot of information. And what I've tried to do is fit everything that you would ever need to know about this exam into every video. In fact, there are 137 videos in my A+ course that consist of over 19 hours of content. And when you run into those types of numbers, it can be a challenge to make it all the way through 137 videos. I get it. So what I did was I created a set of notes that summarizes everything from every video. It's all here. In fact, these are my course notes. This is the digital version. All of the text from every slide that's in there, all of the graphics, all of the important charts, they are in this list. You can see it's pages and pages and pages of this information, and it's all, in the case of the Core 2 course notes, 56 pages of information. If we go to the very end, you can see lots of data in here that you would work through. So these are my course notes. They're not only available in this digital form, I also have a physical version of the course notes. There it is. It's exactly the same information as the digital version, of course, but it's in a printed form. A lot of people prefer that printed book. And if you purchase the physical version, I'll obviously be shipping this to you. And in the meantime, you get a free copy of the digital version when you buy the physical version. So it's a 2-for-1 kind of scenario. So something you can use right now. If you do get the digital or physical version, you can download that digital PDF today, right now, immediately, and start using this. Put it on all of your mobile devices. Make sure it's on all of your computers. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you'll be able to study from this material instantly by accessing the PDF, which of course can be read on any type of operating system. And if you'd like to learn more about it, it's on my website. Go to professormesser.com/1102notes for more information about our course notes. Let's do another question. The next on our list is this one. A company manages 3 separate backup rotations for each day, week, and month. Which of the following would describe this backup methodology? Would it be differential, full, synthetic, incremental, or GFS? Got a number of different options to choose from. A company manages 3 separate backup rotations for each day, week, and month. Which of the following would describe this backup methodology? Is it differential, full, synthetic, incremental, or GFS? If you think you know the answer, there is your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Some folks in the chat room said they just bought those course notes. Well, thank you so much for your support. Other folks are saying the physical book and notes are the greatest of all time. Thank you so much for the kind words for that as well. We work hard to make sure that you're getting something valuable out of these notes and able to use them. And it's a nice summary, I think, of everything that is there. Also seeing that Sabretooth Raptor in the chat room says you recently came across a thicknet cabling installation along with thick UHF cable. I'm sad to say that I know exactly what you're talking about with the vampire taps. We actually had networking equipment that had vampire taps. We did. It's called thicknet. It's a coax style. It's one of the very early 10BASE-5 configurations of Ethernet networking. And you do still find some interesting network configurations that are still out there, that are still running. It's only at 10 megabit per second, but boy, it sure works, doesn't it? It's one of those where with networking, you never know what you're going to run into. If you go into the back deep, dark areas of a data center, you'll find all kinds of interesting things. And that's remarkable. I hope you got some good pictures, Sabretooth Raptor. I'd love to see those of a thicknet cabling installation that is still running today. There's probably a story there too. I'd love to hear the story just so I can understand. Did you run into any token ring mals? That's what I want to know next, which is probably a lot newer. They probably plan to upgrade to token ring later this year. That's what they're working on. Let's see how you did with this question. It asks, a company manages 3 separate backup rotations for each day, week, and month. Which of the following would describe this backup methodology? Is it differential, full, synthetic, incremental, or GFS? How did we do? Well, again, we're a little bit torn as to what we think the answer is. If we go with the plurality of you, 37% of you say the answer is GFS, 29% of you say it's incremental, 18% say it's differential, 10% say it is full, and only 4% say it is synthetic. Well, in this particular question, we know there are separate backup rotations. There's one every day, there's one every week, and there's one every month. But we don't know what we're putting on the backups based on this. We know we're putting something on the backups, but we're not describing the backup process. We're only describing the backup rotations. So there will be a separate group of tapes or backup media every day, a separate set every week, and a separate set every month. So we got 365 in the first set. We have 52 in the weekly set, and we have 12 in the monthly set. Those are your separate backup rotations. Now, what describes a scenario like that where we have these 3 separate backup rotations, generally in different time frames? Well, that's called a GFS rotation, and it stands for grandfather, father, and son. We'll probably have to change that shortly, I would imagine, to something else. But in the meantime, we call it GFS. We can just call it GFS and not know exactly what it's referring to anyway. So in this particular case, we have monthly backups. So maybe if you've got 12 monthly backups, that's the grandfather. Maybe if you have weekly backups, that's the father. And then if you have daily backups, that is the son. That's what we refer to with those. So at least you've got a good way to understand when these particular backups might occur. Here's a better view of the calendar. You could see the son backups are occurring perhaps every weekday. You have a grandfather backup that occurs on the last day of the month. And then you have father backups right in the middle that maybe you're doing every Sunday night, every Monday morning kind of scenario so that you have a weekly backup done. That is the GFS backup schedule. GFS, it doesn't describe what you're putting on the backup. It's describing what you're putting or how you're rotating through the different backup media. So GFS is the answer we were looking for, and that stands for grandfather, father, and son. And indeed, the plurality of you, 37% of you, say the answer is indeed GFS. You would be absolutely right. Since we don't know what we're putting in the backup media, the answers for differential, incremental, full, and synthetic would not apply to this particular question because we have no idea what's on the backups. Each one of them could have been a full backup as far as we know, or maybe we are doing differential backups, or maybe we are doing incremental backups. That's another question for another time, I guess. So if you are in your organization using a GFS model, your natural next question should be, all right, now we understand how we're rotating through the media. What are we putting on the media? Are these full backups? Are they differential? Are they incremental? There's more questions to be asked about that, but that wasn't this question. This question only talked about the rotations and the methodology used for that. And the answer here would indeed be GFS, and 37% of you got that one absolutely right. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is you follow these instructions. You must follow these instructions to earn the CEU. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link at the top or bottom of the site. Click on that Contact Us link. It brings up a form. Put in your name, your email address, and in the subject line, please put May 2024 Core 2. In the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, incremental GFS. Incremental GFS are the super secret code words of the month. You simply can send that to me. It takes me about a week to turn these around, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but I will get back to you an email that has been digitally signed that certifies that you are here for this 1-hour webinar category CEU. That process again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address, in the subject line, put May 2024 Core 2 or something close to it. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, incremental GFS. Those are the ones that will let me know that you must have watched this because you knew the process, you knew the terms, and you knew everything else. And indeed, CompTIA requires you to get a copy of that email and use that when you submit your CEUs. Now, obviously, if you're not collecting CEUs or if you don't have a certification yet, none of that applies to you. We just wasted minutes of your time. I am so sorry. But you will need it eventually, and if you do, you can always come back and watch this video, grab that information, and submit it after the fact. Those are perfectly valid CEUs as well. Well, we got some time. We can do some more questions. I think we should. This next question on our list is this one, and it asks, which of the following Linux commands would be the best way to view all currently running tasks? Would that be CP, DF, LS, SU, or PS? It sounds like I'm just talking nonsense, but all of these really are Linux commands. The question again asks, which of the following Linux commands would be the best way to view all currently running tasks? Would it be CP, DF, LS, SU, PS? It's got to be one of them, right? It sounds like it's not real, but it really is real. We'll step through each one so you at least know what that is. If you think you know the answer, you can lock in your answer right there at professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer the right question. See if you happen to know what that is. Folks in the chat room are asking, if you get the physical copy, do you get the PDF as well? That is exactly what happens for all of my physical edition products. If you get the training materials in the physical form, you automatically get the digital as well that you can download immediately. You don't have to wait for anything to be delivered. We'll just simply make it available on an instant download the instant you purchase. So it makes it very, very convenient. It gives you something to read through and start your studies now instead of waiting for a book to arrive in the mail. But it will get to you there eventually to make that happen. Let's see how well you know your Linux. See if you remember what all those different Linux commands are. All 5 of these answers, by the way, are real Linux commands. So I'm not just putting random letters on the screen. Seems like I'm putting random letters on the screen, but I'm not. Those are real commands that you need to know. So see how well you know them by locking in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. It's got to be one of these, right? Let's see if you know what the answer is. You do have to know quite a bit about Windows on these exams, but you also need to know a good bit about Linux and Mac OS. So it's important to know what those happen to be. I often tell people, if you want to position yourself for the best possible growth in IT, you should know as many operating systems as you can. So make sure that you learn as much as you can about Windows, but also learn as much as you can about Linux and learn as much as you can about Mac OS and Android and iOS and other operating systems too. There's plenty there that we can go through. So make sure you're familiar with all of them, because that's going to help you when we go through and understand what differences and similarities there are between all of these different operating systems. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, which of the following Linux commands would be the best way to view all currently running tasks? Would it be CP, DF, LS, SU, or PS? And what did you put? Let's find out. We'll close the poll, and we can see the answer is we got 50%. We got a majority. PS is the that's not PostScript. PS is the majority. 50.41% of you say that's the right answer. 22% say the answer is LS. 13% say the answer is CP. 7% say it's DF, and then 6% say the answer is SU. No, SU. No, SU. We'll talk about what all those are in just a moment. Let's first talk about what 50% of you chose, which is PS, and it stands for processes. This is basically what it is. It's a shortcut so we can see what processes are running on a system. If you're in Windows and use Task Manager, you've seen this in the Windows world. Well, this is kind of Task Manager for Linux, if you want to think of it that way. You can view the user processes with PS to be able to understand what the answers are. And you can, of course, pipe that information into a third-party app. You can pipe it into more, for example. So especially when you start running them, you will see lots of information going down the screen. Sometimes it's good to pipe that into something that can paginate it so that you can have it go a page, and then you can decide whether you want the next page or go a line at a time, or even search through the output, find something very easily. And you can do that with more. You can also do it with less. Both of those are real things in the Linux world, but PS was the answer we were looking for because it gives you a list of all the processes that are running on someone's system. This is a process on my system. I've got Python running. There's Bash shell running. I've got a lot of other utilities running on this particular system, and you can see all of them along with the process IDs are listed right here in the PS command. Certainly a good option to be able to use this. And of the 5 options that we have here, it's really the only one you would have used as your best option. PS is certainly, and 50% of you agree with that it is the best option. We have others here, other commands here. LS is the list command, lists the files and the other objects that are available in the operating system, file system of your computer. And although it does show you all of the files that you may have stored on a hard drive, an SSD, or any other type of storage media, the LS command does not show you currently running tasks. So LS would not be what we would choose. The CP command is a copy command. It copies one object in your operating system to a separate place in the operating system. It's a good way to copy files, copy directories, copy any other object that may be in the file system using the CP command. But the CP command does not show you any running tasks. It's just copying files. Just like in Windows at the command line, you would use the copy command. Similar scenario, but in Linux. We also have DF. 7% of you chose DF. Shortcut there is disk free. Show you how much space is available on your storage drives. I use this one a lot because I'm filling up my storage drives all the time, and I want to know how much space do I have left. There's a lot of different command line strings you can use for that to show you the output in different ways, but it doesn't show you any running processes or tasks. It only shows you how much disk space you might have available in a particular Linux volume. And then SU is the super user command. It allows you to run different tasks as if you are the root user or the administrator of that operating system. For those of you that use applications in Windows and you run that as administrator, that run as administrator in Windows is very similar to using SU in Linux. So those are all of the real Linux commands that you would use for this. And indeed, as many of you are making a point in the chat room, if you've got a command line open in Mac OS, these are also the same commands in Mac OS that you would use for this. So Mac OS also has CP and DF and LS and SU and PS. You can run all of those because, after all, Mac OS was something that originally was a Unix operating system. And of course, Linux is simply a bit of a derivative of the Linux world of things. SU is And CPDF, LS, SU, and PS are available not only in the Linux side, but also in Mac OS to be able to use that. Well, I know that we're at the top of the hour, but let's squeeze in one more question, maybe two more questions, shall we? Let's get another one going in this list and see what we might use. This next question asks, a company would like to require authentication for anyone connecting to the wireless network. Which of the following should be configured on the access point? Should it be PSK, 802.1x, VPN, WPA2, or IPsec? Got a few to choose from there, don't we? The question again asks, a company would like to require authentication for anyone connecting to the wireless network. Which of the following should be configured on the access point? Would it be PSK, 802.1x, VPN, WPA2, or IPsec? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. There's the link right there on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll have to see what you think the answer might be. This is another one that you probably have seen. You probably have, if you go to work and you connect to the network, before you're able to connect to the wireless network, you may be prompted for a username and password. You haven't even done anything yet. You just got to work. You just want to connect to the wireless network. So something is configured on that access point, but what is it? And we want to know the answer to that. It's got to be one of these. All 5 of these, again, are real things. They're all from your CompTIA exam objectives. Let's see if you happen to know what this answer is by locking it in at professormesser.com/QA. See if you happen to know what these are. A lot of people locking their answers in again, although I was fooled last time. I thought we all knew the answer and 50% of us knew the answer. So we'll have to see if it's another one of those scenarios where we are able to get this running. Let's see if you know what it happens to be. We'll go through this. Again, the question asks, a company would like to require authentication for anyone connecting to the wireless network. Which of the following should be configured on the access point? Is it PSK, 802.1x, VPN, WPA2, or IPsec? We have 56% of you that say the answer is WPA2. We've got 25% that say 802.1x. We have 10% that say PSK, and then 3% apiece for IPsec and VPN. Well, getting this authentication process where someone they are prompted with a username and password to be able to connect to a wireless network, or really any network, it doesn't have to be a wireless network. We need some type of port-based network access control. We need some way so that we're connecting to the network. You don't get access to any network until you authenticate with your normal credentials. In many environments, everyone has a standard username and password that they use to authenticate with everything. You use that username and password to authenticate with Windows, to authenticate to the VPN, to authenticate into email, and to authenticate when you're first connecting to the network. So whenever you start looking at those different options, it's all configured inside of the access point itself. And there are a number of options that can provide you with an answer here. In fact, you may connect to an access point and it doesn't require any authentication. There's no password. There's nothing you would do. We refer to those as open systems. Hopefully you're not using an open system. We're trying to get away in the industry from having any systems that are open. Everything should have a password. Everything should be encrypted, and it should be working that way all the time. And in the latest versions of the 802.11 specification, I think we're doing a pretty good job of finding ways to make that happen, even though we may not even necessarily know the password for that network. What if it just automatically added the encryption piece of it? That's a question and answer for another time, but that's certainly something to consider. Well, there are also times where you may have to configure a key inside of the wireless configuration, and it's just built into the 802.11 access point. That is certainly a type of authentication. If you chose WPA2 or WPA3 as your answer here, I think I could accept that as one of the possible answers, but I don't think it's the best answer. I think if you're first connecting to an access point and it pops you up a prompt that requires authentication for anyone connecting to the wireless network, they'll most likely have this access point configured in an enterprise mode. You'll see it in the access point itself as it'll say WPA2 Enterprise or WPA3 Enterprise. And that means that it's not a single WPA2 key or WPA3 key, and you're not sharing that key amongst everybody that's in the office. Of course you wouldn't do that. That means if someone was to leave the organization, they'd still know your password. By having a separate authentication for every user, we have a much more secure network. And we do that by telling our access point, if anybody needs access to this network, I want you to authenticate that user against a centralized authentication server that we have in our data center. And that authentication server is probably based on your Windows Active Directory login. Maybe you have a separate Radius, LDAP, or TACACS logins. You can use a lot of different types of authentication servers to do this. But in the case of 802.1x, or this port-based network access control, you are able to assign and have different users authenticate with their individual login, which is a much more secure way to do it. So 802.1x is really the best answer for this particular question, although I would also accept WPA2 because WPA2 is also an authentication method, albeit not quite as robust for an enterprise or an office type of environment. So both of those are legitimate. I think the better answer is 802.1x, but in my haste to write this question, I added WPA2, which I think is perfectly valid. So we'll say that we got a good number here. If you combine those two, a lot of people got that one, but I think 802.1x is really the right answer. That's the one you should have chosen. 10% of you said PSK. That pre-shared key is what that refers to in this particular context. Pre-shared key is what you would use in a non-enterprise config where you probably are using pre-shared key at home. Somebody comes to visit you and they go, hey, what's your wireless password? Oh, wireless password is Football Ninja. Okay, Football Ninja. Okay, now I know your wireless password. And now everybody knows your wireless password because you just shouted it across your house. In fact, the neighbors now know your wireless password. Not a very secure way to do things in a workplace, is it? And that's really why WPA2 is not the right answer here. It's an answer, but I don't think it's the right answer. I think 802.1x is a better answer for this because with 802.1x, you just say, oh, use your normal login. Use your normal username and password. And if you're using a guest login, that's something different. We can always talk about that. And a best practice is for using guest logins when you are at home. We also have these last two options, which got the same number of votes, VPN and IPsec. Those two are very much related to each other because IPsec is a type of VPN connectivity. That's a virtual private network that you can run an IP security, IPsec tunnel over if you wanted to. And both of those are perfectly useful if you want to encrypt or keep data confidential as it's being sent across the network. But that wasn't our question. Our question was about authenticating to the network, not sending encrypted data over a tunnel of the network. And if we were sending encrypted data over a tunnel, then VPN and IPsec would be perfectly valid answers. In this case, only about 6% of you combined chose those two, and that's because they are not the right answer for this one. The best answer, 802.1x. The second best answer, WPA2, and none of the others really would apply. I think that really positions us well for knowing what the options might be if you're ever in a scenario where you need to configure either this on a wireless network, and this is an important thing to consider, especially if you're someone who is working on an enterprise network. You might not be wanting to set authentication on a wireless network. You could also set authentication on a wired network. Imagine plugging into a switch and trying to connect to the network, and you're prompted with a username and password prompt. That's all happening because of 802.1x. Well, here you go. You can see I quickly scrambled ahead here so that you could see that we have another question that we would like to do before we're done here. It is our Core 2 practice exam question. For those of you not familiar with this, one of the things that is kind of a pet peeve of mine are websites that have really bad practice questions. And it is very easy to find really bad practice questions, I assure you, on the internet. You've probably seen this. One of the things that I think we should work harder at doing is creating better questions that are more attuned to the requirements of the CompTIA exam objectives. I'm not sure why there are practice exams out there that go off the scope of the exam objectives. I find other practice exams that have just wrong answers in them. Wouldn't it be great if you had questions that were written with the same style and the same tone of the exam? Well, I wrote some, and they are from my practice exams book. This is a pretty big book, 380 pages for my Core 2 practice exams. I realize this is the Core 1 book. For those of you looking, I can't find my Core 2 book. It's around here somewhere. But it's identical, except there's a 2 right there instead of a 1. Same idea though. All of the questions that are in here are from the exam objectives for the current version of the exam. You won't get outdated material in here. And all of the questions have been written specifically to have a similar tone, a similar style as what you would find on the actual exam. Let me show you what I mean. This is a copy of my practice exams book for Core 2. Let's do this question. Again, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. This practice exam is from my C exam. There are 3 separate practice exams in this book. This is the 3rd one. I'm on page 277, and the question asks, a technician has been asked to work on an urgent computer repair while the user is at lunch. When the technician arrives, they notice paperwork on the desk that may contain private customer information. Which of the following would be the best next step? Should you A, complete the repair as quickly as possible, B, ask an associate in the department for assistance, C, move the papers somewhere out of sight, or D, leave without repairing the computer? So now we have some options. Now this is a PDF, and my PDF reader here gives me annotation capability. So if I wanted to highlight different parts of this, if I wanted to select different answers, maybe this is on a tablet and I have a stylus, I can write on the page itself. You can make notes. And because it is a PDF, there's some other features in here maybe you didn't even realize were there. This is page 277. You can see the detailed answers on page 347. Well, nobody wants to scroll through this entire list to get to page 347. So I put a hyperlink right here in the PDF where I just click the details. Boom, I'm on page 347. Jumped all the way there. In fact, you can see the questions there right at the top. And it says the answer is B, ask an associate in the department for assistance. And of course, I explain why the right answer is the right answer. So the real question becomes, if you answered one of the others, then you got the question wrong. And if you look at other practice exams that are out there, it's very likely that it's not going to give you any feedback as to why you got the question wrong. That's not the case in my practice exams book. I take every incorrect answer and I completely document why the wrong answers are wrong, because I think that's a great opportunity to learn. I get questions wrong all the time on a practice exam. It would be nice if something could redirect me why that's wrong and help me explain more about the underlying technology about why I missed that particular question. So you can now read through all of the incorrect answers and why they would not be the right answer in this particular example. This is perhaps not only a very big differentiation between other practice exams out there, I think it's required reading when you're working on a practice exam. In fact, I would highly recommend that even if you get the answer right, don't just skip over the wrong answers. You should read through the incorrect answers as well, because on your actual exam, your question might be about one of these topics instead of what was actually right with this particular question. So it's almost like you're getting 4 different chances to go through technologies, topics, and other subjects associated with this particular exam. Now, if you read the question and like a number of you in the chat room are saying, well, it may depend on where you work and what the policies are. No, it doesn't. There are some very, very important things to consider when it comes to understanding confidentiality of someone's data and why the right answer is right. But if you're trying to figure out where's the angle for this question, what is the technology they're really talking about, or what is the topic in this question, at the very bottom of this page, I put a QR code and a link to the video that describes the information that was contained in the question itself. So if you come across a question and there's words in question and technologies being talked about, or you just have no idea what the question's talking about, you can watch the video first and then get more information about why this particular topic is being considered. This is from my 2201102 course, Objective 4.7. The video name is Professionalism, and there's the link. You can either click on the link inside of this, or you can use the QR code if you have the physical book, and it will take you right to that video. When you're done here, you can push the back button. Do you even know a PDF had a back button? It does. This has a back button. Most PDF readers do have back buttons. I'll click the back button, and we're back to where we started. And I can go to the next question that's on our list. That is my practice exams book. Maybe that's something that can help you with your studies. This is one that has, again, 3 separate practice exams, 5 performance-based questions in each one of those. So there are 15 performance-based questions in this single book. And of course, if you get this with my course notes and you bundle these together, you also get a little bit of a cost benefit. And why wouldn't you? So it's almost like getting a little bit of a sale price when you start bundling these together. You can find out more on my website. Go to professormesser.com/core2pe. Well, everything that we've talked about today comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And well, it should, because that is your best source to understand exactly what is going to be covered on your exam. I have a copy of the exam objectives right here on my screen. And you, as we go through this, you can see it is extensive. It tells you everything you need to know about the exam. This is very unique to CompTIA. I guess nothing is very unique, but it's unique to CompTIA. It's something that, of course, Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. A lot of folks that have certification programs only give you a very high-level overview, but not CompTIA. They tell you exactly what you need to know. They tell you bullet by bullet everything. A lot of people ask me, how do I know if I'm ever ready to take my exam? Well, you have the exam objectives. It's a perfect set of checklists to go through to help you understand if you really are ready for your exam or not. And it's free. It costs nothing. If you want to download the latest version of these exam objectives, you can follow my link by going to professormesser.com/objectives, or go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It'll be the first link that comes up. It's a great thing to have for all of your studies. We do one of these study groups every month for Core 2. We did our Core 1 study group a couple of days ago. Next week, we have our Network Plus study group. The week after that, we have our Security Plus study group. And I've already set the schedule for the study groups for next month. So if you wanted to come back for your A Plus study groups in June, our Core 1 study group is on June the 4th. The Core 2 is on June the 6th. And then we have Network Plus on June the 12th and Security Plus on the 19th. But of course, as I mentioned, we still have study groups to do this month for Network Plus and Security Plus. You can come back next week for those, for at least the Network Plus one. Be glad to have you step through our Network Plus questions and see how much you know about networking. Well, we're not done today, even though I'm finished asking you questions for the day. We're not finished with the Q&A, because now's your chance to ask me questions. And you can do that by submitting a question in your Q&A. Follow the same link we've been using the whole time. Go to professormesser.com/QA and submit your question using the tab at the top of the screen. Also let you know, of course, we have our course notes and practice exams on our website. You can follow the main menu to find those, or simply visit professormesser.com/1102success. Don't forget about the discounted vouchers available on professormesser.com/vouchers if you happen to be in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory. And we have different connections on different social media sites doing different things. So if you ever want to find us on your favorite social media site, you simply type in professormesser.com/discord/Twitter, because that's what it is, /YouTube, /Instagram. There's the Xers out there that want me to call it X. I can't do it yet. I still call it Twitter. It's still Joe Robbie Stadium. There's a whole lot of things that you just can't unprogram yourself. I'll get there eventually. Don't worry. It'll work its way out. This is a great way that you can find us wherever we happen to be on the internet, something that you might be able to quickly locate a piece of information, or to contact us, because I do monitor all of those. Well, that brings us to the end of the first hour of the study group, hour plus. We went a little bit of overtime, but I think it was worth it, right? Thank you so much for joining us. Stick around for the after show. I'll take your Q&A. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the A Plus study group. Okay. Twitter is the Joe Robbie Stadium of social media. I don't know what that means, but there it is. Okay, it's time for the after show, everybody. It's time for Q&A, but in the other direction. Now I'm going to take your questions and we'll see if you have something that you would like to ask. This can be a question about certifications, about IT, about technology, about something in the news, about, well, anything you'd like to ask. You can put them all in and I will take your questions. You can submit them at any time by visiting professormesser.com/QA, and I will be glad to sift through them to find the things that you might want to know about. I get a chance to at least filter out certain questions. So this is not a ask me anything, but it is a ask me pretty much whatever you want to, and then I'll decide whether I want to answer it or not. That's too many letters to put into a single thing. So it turns out to be something very easy and much easier to manage than that. So feel free to submit your question. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and I will be glad to review those questions and see what we can do with answering them. Let's start with a question that is more of a logistics question. This one is from user Anonymous, who says, should the Core 2 exam be taken immediately after the Core 1 exam? Or should there be some time in between, such as a few days or longer than that? Well, this is really up to you. There's really only one specific rule that we have to keep in mind. Well, a couple of rules that you can keep in mind about taking these two exams. The first is I'll tell you, you can take them in any order. You could take the Core 2 exam first and then take the Core 1 exam. So, or you could do it the other way. You take the Core 1 exam first and then take the Core 2 exam. It's completely up to you which one you take at what time. The only thing that's important about this is both of those exams that you take and pass must be from the same exam version, the same edition. So, for example, the 2A plus exams that are currently available are the 2201101 and the 2201102. So let's say that today you took the 2201101 and you passed it. You're halfway there now. You still have to take your 2201102, your Core 2 exam. And you have to get that exam completed. You have to pass that exam before the entire series is retired. And as we mentioned earlier on in the study group, we think that retirement time frame is going to be somewhere around November of 2025. So if you took your exam today, you would have until approximately November of 2025 to pass the second exam and become A+ certified. So there's no specific deadline in between those. The only real deadline you have is the retirement date for the exam series that you are currently working on. Now, what happens if you pass one of these and you don't pass the other exam before the exam series is retired? You have to start all over again. All of that work you did to pass that first exam, it's gone. It's out the window. It's worthless to you. And that's why we always keep track of these dates so that you know when the retirement date is going to be and you can make appropriate plans to get everything studied and passed before you lose any of that important time on these exams. So I tell people you just need to do it any time before it is retired. Some people will ask about the significance of doing them very close to each other. And there's probably some validity there. If you look at the exam objectives for the Core 1 exam and the exam objectives for the Core 2 exam, you'll notice there's not a lot of overlap. There's almost no overlap between those two exams, and that's by design from CompTIA. They really wanted to make it so that each of those exams was really self-contained, and they are effectively a self-contained entity. And that's why I mentioned you could take Core 2 first, you could take Core 2 second. It's up to you. You can really put them in any order. The other thing that's important with that is because they're so very different, it's not really incredibly necessary that you immediately take the next exam right after you pass the first exam. There are some people indeed that will take both exams on the same day. I definitely do not recommend this as your default. It would really have to be somebody who's already been in the industry for a long time. You already know a lot of this content. You're really just getting the certification for maybe a third party reason. Maybe you need that certification for a particular role that you have, but you already know this. So you'll study up for a couple of weeks. You'll walk in and take both of them on the same day. That's a very unusual situation, and it's one I do not recommend people doing, especially since there's not any overlap. why would you force yourself into learning all of that content for a single day? It's not something that is your best chance for success. In fact, there have been many people, unfortunately, that have come to our Discord that say, I just took both exams on the same day. What a mistake. I should not have done that. And they kind of learned the hard way that that was perhaps not the most optimal way to study and take both of these exams. Can you do it? Absolutely. Have people done it? Yes, they have. Should you do it? That's really up to you, but I would argue probably not, unless you really are very, very familiar with this content anyway. So there's a little bit of that to concern yourself with. So ultimately, Anonymous, your answer is how quickly should you take them? You should take them as long as you need between exams to study and learn everything that is listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. That's your only requirement. That is the time frame. So I'll bring up the objectives again, just so you can understand what I'm talking about. So you finished Core 1, you passed that exam. Now, when should you take Core 2? Well, how can you check off every single one of these bullets in Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Domain 4, and Domain 5? Or Domain 4. There's no Domain 5 in the Core 2. So you've got a lot of bullets you have to know about. So that is the one where you check off all of these things. And as soon as you have crossed through all of these individual bullets and you can explain these to yourself or someone else, and you feel confident in the information that you're providing, now you're ready to take that exam. So this might take you 2 weeks. It might take you 2 months. If you talk to me about taking a certification exam, it takes me 6 months to study for most certification exams. I got a lot going on. I got things happening. I have very little time to study during the week. So maybe it takes me a little bit longer, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly reasonable. The time frame's really up to you. It's really about that retirement date. And as I mentioned, as we sit here in May of 2024, you've got well over a year. And considering that on average, it probably takes folks about 2 to 3 months to study for a single exam, you got plenty of time to study. So I think you'll be okay as far as the time frames are concerned. Let's have a look at another question that has come in. Again, you can submit questions by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your question. And at least I'll be able to look at them when we go through these and be able to work through the details. Let's talk about technology and what we can do with this technology in our career. This is from Kyle, who asks, "Hi, Professor. I was wondering what your guide would be to becoming a network engineer. Thank you." Well, this is something I'm probably one of the most fun types of jobs I ever had was being a network systems engineer, working at the network level, designing networks, implementing networks, working on network management, understanding protocol decodes, implementing reporting systems, and looking at network metrics, understanding the S-flow, NetFlow, all of those technologies. Just a lot of fun. I love the network side of things. Once you understand protocols and you can see things happening on the network and you can read those protocol decodes, you have a knowledge of everything happening. And you can answer questions that no one else can answer. If somebody wants to know, why is this application slow? You know why it's slow. When somebody says, why does it take this amount of time to transfer a file from this site to this site? You know exactly why, because you see the packets, you know the design of the network, you know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. And when people often say, well, the network is down, Google is down, the internet is down, you know that that's not actually what's going on. And you have the ability to understand exactly what is going on. Network engineering is a lot of fun. There is a specialty to network engineering that's not unlike a specialty you would have for learning Windows technologies or Linux operating systems or database technologies or cloud-based systems or et cetera, and keep going down this list. And if networking is something that interests you, it's a great niche to get into, not just from a managing switches and routers perspective, but I think the designing and implementation and problem solving side can be not only fun, but also very lucrative. And that's a good combination in my mind. If you're interested in networking, I really feel like you should focus on things network related. Obviously, Network Plus is a very good entry-level certification to get the basics of networking down. But if you know you're really going to get into networking, you want to learn more about switches, about routers, you want to configure and set up these and understand more about the protocols underneath the surface that are going across the air or across the cable or across the fiber. One of the things you might want to consider are some of the Cisco-related certification. CCNA is a good place to start. That's the Cisco Certified Network Administrator certification. It's a very popular networking certification. It is not an entry-level cert, but it's probably the next level up. It's almost an intermediate level cert. I guess you could call it an intermediate level. It's more of a right in the middle between entry level and intermediate, I guess. You could probably put it somewhere in there, depending on how you want to consider those. They're also very popular certifications, and many employers like to see those certifications on a resume to let them know that you're familiar with the switching and the networking and the routing and the protocols and the configurations, something that can lead you into a role of networking. One of the things that got me into networking was protocol decodes, interestingly enough. I was working at an insurance company, and I was handling desktop management, desktop operating systems. I was deploying Windows operating systems across the network to different systems. I was automating the process of application installs. This was in the early days of Windows. Back when dinosaurs delivered the computers, we would set them up and automate the process so we could just plug in a computer and it would put everything you would need on that computer. It was already built into Windows at that time. There was already quite a bit of automation you could do. And I was walking by a group of folks that were on the network side of things at the insurance company, and they had just gotten this new box called a sniffer. And that term, it's very generically used today, but it's the name of a product. It's a brand name for a series of products at the time made by Network General. And it was sitting on the ground, and it made these Geiger counter noises. Those of you that go back in the day with sniffers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Every time packets went over the network, every time there was a frame, it would make kind of a clicking noise. Click, 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 click. It was fascinating. And they were all sort of huddled around the new toy that we had just spent $10,000 on and plugged into the network. And I said, well, that's interesting. It's almost like you're walking outside and there's a bunch of people looking in the sky, and you stop and you look up in the sky. Same scenario. So I go by, I look down, I go, hey, what you got there? And they go, this is a sniffer. I go, that sounds weird. Okay, what's that? And they go, this tells us all of the packets on the network, all of the frames. We can see everything inside the frames. We can watch everything going across the network and see all of the data. And instantly, I heard a bell. I heard angels singing. I heard... the world started becoming clearer, and the colors were brighter and the sky was bluer. Suddenly I was able to grasp how useful that was, because I had been working so long on getting these desktop systems to run optimally and trying to get it to run things across the network and automate these processes. And I was constantly running against problems that I could not decipher. I could not understand. So I now had a tool that showed me everything. And little did I know that was the jumping off point for me. That was the start of my networking career, and indeed of my cybersecurity career, was that single device. It gave me an insight that I did not have. And I said, do you have a manual for this thing? Now, you have to remember, this is in the days before there was Wireshark or really any way to view packets and frames going across the network. And so they handed me the manual. The manual was literally a hardback book. I wish I could find a manual of an old sniffer these days. It was beautiful, well written. It told you exactly what this product does, how it works, what it's showing. It even goes into a little bit of protocol analysis. And from that point, I wanted to know more about protocol analysis. I found Laura Chappell. I got her books, dove into those, started reading through the details, and really became a lot more knowledgeable in the product than anybody else in the company, because I was spending so much time on it. It was so interesting to me. And I think this is kind of a good point to make about any technology you run into, especially a technology that you think That's interesting. If you ever find yourself in that scenario, it's time to build a home lab. It's time to run more applications. It's time to download different utilities. It's time to dig into why that interests you and for you to learn more about that technology. Because if you become more knowledgeable and have an expertise in that particular niche, you have more value. You have knowledge that no one else has. And that ultimately, from that job of using local area and wide area network sniffers, distributed sniffers, implementing reporting systems on the network, all these network general products, and learning more about what's happening on the wire, I was able to move from that insurance company to a value-added reseller and ultimately became a systems engineer for Network General, supporting and understanding their sniffer products. And that was a big change in my career because it took me out of the corporate world and put me into very specifically a kind of a pre-sales engineer role, which is a very specific type of role in IT. But it was one that required you to be very, very knowledgeable of the products, perhaps more knowledgeable than I ever thought I would need to know about any of these things. And it also made me understand that, oh, this never ends. The process of learning and growing and more learning and more growth, it's constant in IT. I had no idea. One of the first things you do when you went on board with Network General is they flew you out to a training. It was a worldwide training that they would do for 2 weeks in California. And for 2 weeks, we did nothing but sniffer. And when you come back from a training like that, you're ready to go. You've already got a knowledge of the product, or you thought you had a knowledge of the product going in. Now you really know it. And now you start learning even more from the perspective of people who need these technologies on their network. So that's a very good example of how one type of networking technology, and that's only one type of networking technology, can ultimately propel you into a very, very different career. You can do a similar thing with routers. Take for example, Cisco routers. That is a technology that's very niche. There's certainly a lot of people that know Cisco routers, thankfully, but there is a small number of people that are extremely knowledgeable in Cisco routers. They have a CCIE certification. They are the highest certified folks that you would find on that router world of things. And those people tend to get paid very well and work for very large companies that have very big routers. So it's an example of narrowing down that niche, finding the things that are interesting to you, at least interesting today, and then you can use those later in your career. What's interesting about that also, just as an aside, is I found that I was really getting knowledgeable in that particular side of things, but that doesn't mean that's where you stay. And as I mentioned, I used that knowledge of what's happening on the network, and I was able to leverage that into a career dealing with cybersecurity, specifically as a pre-sale systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks. So working on firewalls, understanding, protecting the network and wide area network and local area network and VPNs and authentications and malware detection and cloud-based systems. It was all there. The virtualization, that was all part of the Palo Alto Network side of things. A world I would have never gotten to or even thought about had I just not seen these guys playing around with a sniffer on the floor. I can remember it like it was yesterday as I'm walking down the hallway and wondering what in the world they were doing. And sometimes you never know. It's one of those things I think I heard yesterday. You never know it's a career until you're well into the career. At that point, I didn't know it was a career. I had to figure it out. And ultimately, that's what it ended up being. There was a question in the chat room about, so what's the difference between a network engineer and a network systems engineer? Well, really nothing. These terms we use, how about a junior engineer? How about a network specialist? How about a network consultant? How about it? It's all the same thing. It's people that know the network. Now, obviously, there's probably nuances depending on the job title in different companies. But I would expect if you were a network engineer at one company and a network engineer at another company, there may be a completely different set or a very relatively different set of job descriptions associated with that. But that's a very good example of how once you understand the underlying technology, once you understand packets, once you understand routers, once you understand switches, you can apply that knowledge to any packet capture, to any router, to any switch. It doesn't have to be a particular manufacturer, a particular model, or a particular version. The idea is you're getting this foundational knowledge of the technology that you can then apply to whatever you do in your career. And that's why I tell you, it's not going to be whatever you choose today is not going to be what you do the rest of your career in IT, because everything is moving under our feet constantly. Now, I would have never known what I would be doing with the cloud 20 years ago, but now obviously it's well integrated into the things that we do today. Well, 20 years from now, it's going to be a different group of technologies. What's it going to be? I don't know. If I knew, I would buy stock now. But that's not really going to work for me so much. The clock is running. You have to figure it out quickly, dive into it, learn as much as you can, as fast as you can. And I will predict, as the chat room is saying, it's AI. No, it's, as we've clearly seen, AI is probably the dumbest thing that technology has ever seen. AI has a lot of A and very little I. There's just no I associated with it. It is so niche and so problematic that it just doesn't work. So I think that a lot of stockholders would like AI to be more than it is. I think the media would like AI to be more than it is, but as we've probably all seen, it really isn't. It's just hypey hype. Doesn't work so much for most everything we're doing. Unless you need a really poorly created image, maybe you need bad music, it's perfect for you. That's what you can do with AI, apparently. That's the problem. And I think, and in fact, from a perspective of someone who creates content for someone to get trained to earn these certifications that are going to get you a job or get you a better job, I'm not touching AI for that. I tried it out. I said, what if we used AI to create training materials? Here, AI, make something. Okay, here, have a look at this, AI said. And I said, thank you, AI. Let me look at it. Ooh, this is awful, AI. What were you doing here? I don't know, but I just did whatever. Okay, AI, thank you so much. We'll try not to ever call you ever again. So we have a very clear no AI. No, that was Wakanda. I don't know what I just did there. No AI, zero AI whenever we're working through training materials here. It's much better if you put that off to the side for playthings, but we have to do real work here that makes a difference. And you can't do that when you put it in the hands of AI. Turns out it doesn't work. So next on our list, let's keep going through questions. Now that I look forward to your cards and letters from all you AI people. Let's go through the list of other things that you have sent in to me. A lot that you have here. Plenty that you have. Oh, this is a good one. We'll go with The Rock, who asks me, after you become certified, how do you keep up to date with technology changes and other relevant information about the industry? Any tools you could use or entities you could follow, like SANS.org, for example? Well, that is a very good question. It's something I struggle with constantly because it changes a lot in our industry. The things that I was reading through and trying to keep up with 10 years ago are very different than the things I read through today, because the things from 10 years ago, some of them aren't here anymore because there's so many changes with media, with journalism, and that's generally speaking in the industry, in the world of all types of journalism, of all types of resources, but it's also hit the IT world as well. We don't have the IT media that we used to have. Back when I worked for that insurance company, we would get these weekly trade magazines, these trade journals that would have all of the latest news and reports and reviews and Q&A. You have none of that now. It all went to the web, and eventually most of it disappeared. Turns out it was very, very difficult for these large companies to figure out the web in a way that made sense. And as someone who is a content creator, I don't know how they screwed it up, because it's something that everybody's here. We're all on the internet. How can you not have content or create a business model for content that is both profitable and something that people can really, really use. But they can't. I don't know what they did there to mess those up. So you really have to go to, now I find it's more of an individual basis to grab this data. A good example that Dwayne used was SANS.org. I think that's a very good place. They have great newsletters that will show up in your inbox. So every week I get a couple of newsletters from SANS.org. One that gives me updates on what the latest threats for the week are. And they have another one that describes attacks that people have suffered through and a lot of important news about security and the way it works. But there's also individual bloggers and journalists and researchers that have fantastic websites as well. And I would highly recommend you look around at some of those. We just don't have access to what we used to have from a journalism and a kind of a news perspective. It's very hard to get good news on technology. First, it's difficult that journalists aren't technologists. So a lot of the times, the people writing the articles are simply trying to interpret what someone else is telling them about the technology. And it ultimately ends up with a disconnect between what the real thing is and what the journalist's interpretation of that thing happens to be, which is really more human nature than anything. It's difficult to make that work. So it's hard to find a journalist who's knowledgeable enough to be able to tell us what's going on. So often we end up drilling down into the problem somewhere else anyway. And with a front end like Twitter, like Reddit, you have other places to go for this. I love reading through individuals like Brian Krebs, KrebsOnSecurity.com. That's a great website. But it's a good example of how one person who has their own view and perspective of this, who is already very knowledgeable with technology and can tell a story about those technologies, can really give you insight into what the hackers are doing, what the latest breach was about, and even give you a little bit of an inside story. My sources tell me that. And he actually has sources that show a lot of those things. So it's really like almost anything else we do these days. We go to social media, we go to individuals who are knowledgeable, and instead of having a middleman, which used to be the media for us here in IT, we now just go right to the source and figure out what they're doing. A lot of great, not just websites, but YouTube channels as well on security. There's some great physical security YouTube channels I love to watch that are just fascinating because it's a side of security we often don't talk about. We often talk a lot about the patching and the buffer overflows and the SQL injections and keeping your systems up to date. We often don't think that someone could pick the lock in your door in 7.5 seconds and be in the door, and now all of the work you did was no good. There's a lot of people in the chat room are mentioning good ones. Krebs, Cyberwire, Dark Reading, that's a good one. You know, you've just got to kind of hunt around. And if you go out to a good place, if you want a good list, almost every week, it seems, on Reddit, in the sysadmin subreddit or the security subreddit, someone's always asking, hey guys, what do you read? And you can just look through the latest list of those to find out what most people are finding. It's kind of what we're doing these days. It's a hunt and peck and find exactly what we're looking for. A little bit of a challenge. I'm always looking for the next thing that I can add to the list so I can put it on my system and make that happen. Other questions. Let's keep going. Other questions in here. Very quickly, a question came across that said, how many points do you get when you use your CE Info for the live streams? You get a 1-hour webinar category CEU. So those are the two things. There's different categories of CEU. The one we best applies for what we're doing here is a webinar CEU. And you can only collect a certain number of webinar category CEUs in a single 3-year renewal period. So unfortunately, if you need to collect 20 CEUs to renew your A+ certification, you can only watch 5 of my live streams and get 5 CEUs. You can't get 6 in a 3-year period. You can't get 20. Can't just watch 20 of these and be done, sadly. That would be great, but you cannot. So you have to go to the CompTIA website, look at their CEU certification program guidelines, make sure that you're doing the renewal process that's best for you. And if you're not sure, Would you believe I have a video on this? Of course I do. So if you look in the YouTube video description of this video, it's a video on how to renew your certification in just a few hours. And in there, I do describe practically every way you could renew your cert and the advantages and disadvantages for each of those different ways to renew. Who knows? You might have already done something that allows you to renew your certification. You maybe have no idea that you've even done that. So have a look at that video. It may give you some insight, and certainly the YouTube or the CompTIA website would be the best documentation for that as well. Other questions. It's a pretty good one from Tiger. Tiger asks, speaking of news, how do you feel about the government's move not to require degrees anymore for job requirements? Do you think the job market will follow suit? This is based on a press release that was put out by the White House over the last week, where they have officially mandated in the U.S. federal government that positions in IT will not necessarily require a formal degree to be qualified for those positions. It is quite honestly pretty similar to the way we do it in non-governmental roles. Although you probably have seen in many job postings out in the world that a lot of corporations will list out, it would be great if you had a 4-year degree, this certification, and you were knowledgeable in these technologies. But what I have found, and what you may not even realize, is that in many organizations, those are recommendations, and they are in no way a requirement. I have worked with many people in IT that do not have a college degree. End of story. But these have always been with organizations that are not governmental. If you ever want a set of rules, if you ever want someone to dictate to you arbitrary requirements, then you need a good government. And the government's really good at doing that. They're really good at making lists, and they're perhaps even more good at sticking to the list. Why are we sticking to the list? We don't know, but we're sticking to this list that we made. And this is what's happened with our federal government in the United States, is that there are IT positions that as a requirement you must have a 4-year degree. End of story. And if you submit a resume and you do not have a 4-year degree, you don't get the job. You're automatically disqualified. There's no talking about it. Yeah, but I've been in the industry for 20 years and I'm the most knowledgeable in this particular topic. And I've created standardization documentation, and I've worked with this particular part of the field, and I'm the only one in the world who's ever touched this product. Yeah, but you don't have a 4-year degree, so therefore you can't work for the federal government. That's really what they're trying to fix in our federal government today. So they are now making it more of a mandate to say, we're not going to do that anymore with particular jobs in IT in the U.S. federal government. And they will of course set other requirements, but they will not require necessarily with certain positions that this be a formal degree, a formal 4-year degree from a university, which makes sense to me because, by the way, that's how everyone non-governmental is doing it. So like anything else, the government's just a little bit behind when it comes to technology. And practically any organization I've ever worked for, I don't know, in the last 20 years, I've worked with people there who were peers of mine, and did not have a formal degree from college. And that's just what we've been doing out here in the world for a long time. So I'm happy that our federal government's kind of caught up to that. And I think that will open some doors for people who would like to get that entry-level position in IT, that have learned in the field, they've learned in the trenches, they have learned from other ways than getting a 4-year degree at a university. As many of you who have watched my live streams before, I've constantly told you that an IT degree at a 4-year university is first exceptionally rare. And when it is not rare, it is exceptionally incongruent with IT. In fact, if you look at the IT program from a 4-year university, it will almost always have things within the program that have nothing to do with IT. I know, for those of you familiar with universities, they do that with everything. They do that with every program. If you get a degree in business, you have to go take calculus. Yep, they do it. It is just one big. Well, there's a lot of reasons they do this. None of them good, but there are always going to be classes and things you have to do within a 4-year university that have nothing to do with your career or your major, and that's a really good example. Now, there are some 4-year schools and they're exceptionally rare, that have a very good IT program where they're teaching you about information technology, where you're learning about operating systems and networking and security and the things that people are doing with IT in the world. But I would say after evaluating this, and I've done tons of research on this over the last 5 years, that 4-year universities are exceptionally poor at providing IT training. So why would you go get a degree in IT if it's so bad? Well, you don't. And the problem is when you show up at the federal government and they say, well, where's your 4-year degree? Like, well, I was going to get one, but it's awful. Why would I go get a 4-year degree in something that doesn't actually tell me anything about operating systems, networking, or security? And they said, well, that's too bad because we made a list. Not sure if you've seen our list. We have a very big list. We sat in a room. We had a committee. We came up with a list. Took us a year. We figured out what the minimums should be for this job. So here's our list. And on the list, see there's an asterisk right here next to 4-year degree. That means it's required. So no, you can't have a job. Now, we haven't talked to you about what you know. We haven't talked to you about the things you've done in your career. We haven't talked to you about challenges that you've had and how you've resolved them. No, you just don't have a degree. So therefore, we're not talking to you. So I think it's a good change. I think it's a change we should have done a long time ago. But I'm glad they caught up to it. And I think it's only going to allow people into positions to get in and then move up within those positions. And I'm glad to see it. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. Other ones that are in here, I'm sort of flipping through. I'm editing on the fly. For those of you watching this live, I apologize. It's hard to do this when you're reading and talking at the same time. So this is probably a little bit short-sighted, but we're going to step through it anyway because I have an answer for you. This is from Ethan. Hey, Ethan, give me a call. It's probably not that Ethan. I'm taking my 1102 later today. What are some last-minute things I could do to prepare for the exam? Well, first thing you should do is hop into a time machine and ask me this question a week ago because there's not a lot you can do at the last minute, but I will give you what I would do if I was in your position last minute. What would you do? And as you're probably not surprised, the answer of what I would do is go to the exam objectives. I've only talked about the exam objectives this entire time. I apologize. I keep going back to it, but this is how valuable this document is. So this is where you should go and start at the very top. Section 1.0, Domain 1.0 operating system says, identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions. So for Windows 10, Windows 10 Home, Windows 10 Pro, Windows 10 Pro for workstations, and Windows 10 Enterprise. What are those? How are they different? Where would you use them? Next is feature differences. Domain access versus workgroup. What is that? Explain it to me. Desktop style / user interface. What do you find there? The availability of remote desktop protocol. Is it different between different versions? It might be, certainly from a service perspective. What are the differences? Random access memory support limitations. There are differences in how much memory can be used by different editions of Windows. What are those differences? BitLocker. What is that? There's a funny capitalization. gpedit.msc. What is that? And when would I use it? And then lastly, upgrade paths, in-place upgrade. How is that done with Windows 10 and these editions? So already in this first section of the first domain, I've come up with 20 questions for you. Answer those 20 questions, know each one of those bullets, then go to the next. Let me put this in a different format here. So there's our operating systems. Let's go to the next one on our list, section 1.2. Given a scenario, use the appropriate Microsoft command tool, and we just keep going. So the reason I say we really need to rewind about a week and ask this question again is it's going to take you a week to go through this at a minimum for each one of these. So that's why I think if you're getting ready or you think you're getting ready to take your exam, you really need to go through this about a week before to see if you really are. If you are not, if you go through this list and you realize, wow, about half of this stuff I did not have the answer for, then you may want to reschedule your exam. You can reschedule your exam. Is it 24 hours before, or is it 48? Somebody's going to check me on here, because I was just looking at some different certification programs, and they're different depending on the certification provider. I believe it's 24 hours ahead. There you go. Chat room's confirmed 24. So 24 hours before your exam time, you can change the date of your exam. Let me give you a life hack on this one. And I should put this into my book as well. Lori, make a note, send me an email. If you are changing your exam time online on the OnView system, that is where you would set the time frames for your exam. They do have a way that you can easily click and change the time. It doesn't always take. There's something about their interface, and I don't know whether it's the submission process or it's the interface itself, but there are a large number of people, an unusually large number of people that go through the process of rescheduling their exam, and then they find out later it didn't actually reschedule it. And their exam time was the original time. They obviously did not appear for their exam because they thought they changed it. And they call in and find out, well, your exam was yesterday. No, I changed that. Nope, it was yesterday. So if you make a change to your exam time, please go back in and confirm the change. Log back, log out, log back in, look at the exam information. Don't trust that you're going to receive a confirmation email. Don't try, because that's a whole different set of problems I could talk to you about. Don't think that even though you pushed the button and it told you and it said it was good and everything looks fine, don't believe it. Log out, log back in, and then please confirm that change was made. So there you go. In fact, Elaine in the chat room, I rescheduled it. It ended up not rescheduling, even though it said it was good. This is what I'm talking about. So please, please, oh please, make sure you go back in and check those time frames if you make a change to those dates. So you can always push it out. And it's one of those that I think can be useful because you can keep pushing it out, but you can only push it out to the final date of expiration of your voucher, or the date when you originally, a year from when you made the original reservation. So when you purchase a voucher, which is effectively just a way to pay for the exam, I have discounted vouchers on my site. If you buy an A+ voucher today, that A+ voucher is good for a year. But you have to not only book your exam before that voucher expires, you have to take the exam before that voucher expiration date. Wait, you're using the voucher to book it. You know, if I booked it today, what does it matter? Well, it does matter. That's their rule. So you can't just purchase a voucher today, book your exam, and then every month push it out a month for 3 years. Can't do that. You have to take the exam before the expiration date of your original voucher. Just something to keep in mind. But you can change the dates. So read through your exam objectives, go through what you think is there. If you feel like you're ready to take it, go take it. If you feel like you're not ready to take it, make sure you modify the date at least 24 hours before your exam time, and you can keep doing that. There's no charge for doing that. So it makes it very easy to do the right thing for you, what you would like to do. Whatever the best option is for you, you can decide what you want to do with that. Let's keep, since we're on this mode of, let's say we took the exam and we got certified and we are A+ certified. And then next year in November, CompTIA comes out with a new set of exams, the 1201 and 1202, whatever the next series of A+ is going to be. They come out with a new set. Well, we got certified today. We've been certified for a year plus, a year and a half. And now the exam changes. So Leon asks, do you need to retake those exams every 3 years? Or employers don't care as long as you're certified? Well, let's break this out and really describe these two different worlds. There is a world when you are studying for these exams and you're taking these exams. You're in that pre-certification world where you've got the 2201101, the 2201102. Those are the current versions of the questions on these exams. That's the edition of the exams. And you've now worked to get certified. You take both of those exams. You pass both of those exams. Let's say you pass the second exam today here in May of 2024. You are A+ certified. And if you passed it today, you're A+ certified for 3 years. Your certification will remain valid for 3 years. At that point, you're in a different world. You're now out of the studying for your certification world. You're in the world of people who are certified, which means once you are certified, if CompTIA changed the exam every day, instead of every 3 years, let's say they change the exam version every day, doesn't matter to you. You're certified. Let's say they change it from 2 exams to 3 exams. Doesn't matter to you. You're already certified. Let's say they change it from 2 exams to 1 exam. Doesn't matter to you. You are already certified. So whatever change they make to the certification process, it means nothing to people who are already certified. Now, there are different ways to renew your certification. There are people that took their A+ exam 15 years ago and got A+ certified, and every 3 years they simply renew it. And as long as they've renewed it every 3 years, they are today just as A+ certified as somebody who passes both of their exams today. There's no difference to anyone, including employers, when you got certified. The only important part is, are you currently certified? Is your certification still valid? And there are lots of ways to renew your cert. You can go through the process of renewing by taking a higher level certification exam from CompTIA, from taking a third-party certification exam. You can collect CEU points. You can take the CertMaster CE application. There's ways to do that. Or if you wanted to, you could take both A+ exams again. Let's say a new version of A+ comes out. You could take the new version of those exams if you really wanted to. But I would argue that's probably the hardest thing you can do to renew your cert, is to take the exams again. Plus, it's sort of expensive to take 2 A+ exams again. So that may not be your best bet, but you could. Do you need to do it? No, I would say not only do you not need to do it, there's plenty of other ways to renew your cert. I would really recommend you don't. There's very, very few situations where taking the exams again would be a good idea. I just don't think they're the best way to renew your cert. Again, I have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, on how to renew your certification, where I go through each of those scenarios and I explain what is the advantage and disadvantage of each one. I think the best way to renew is to take the CertMaster CE. You can renew in just a few hours. I've had people show up in my Discord and they've said, oh my gosh, I just realized my A+ certification expires tomorrow. It will no longer exist tomorrow. It is a former certification tomorrow. What can I do? Well, it's too late to study for a third-party certification. It's too late to study for a higher level CompTIA certification. It's too late to gather CEUs, because that can take some time, unless there's something very specific you have done in that 3-year period that you can document that would give you enough CEUs. For example, you attended a training class. Those can often give you enough CEUs to renew, and this person did not. So his best bet was to renew in just a few hours by using CertMaster CE. The CE stands for Continuing Education. And they were able to purchase, download, go through the entire course in a number of hours, submit that to CompTIA, and they were renewed like that. Before the day was even over, they had finished their renewal, and they came back in the chat and go, I did it. We're all done. All renewed. That's all I had to do. It's a little bit more expensive than paying for the annual maintenance fees for collecting CEUs, but it happens in just a few hours. And in some cases, like that one, it now gives them another 3 years onto their certification. So it's something you can do very, very easily. I think that's probably the way that most people will handle that. Let's do some more questions. I've got some time. I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, past the top of the hour, so we're a little bit of overtime. But I've got more in here we can pull from. Other questions. Let's keep going in this list. Here's one that says, hi, Professor. That's all it says. Hi. Hey. Glad we were able to That one I can answer. That one I've got a good answer for. Other questions we have. Once you pass your A+, someone asks, how long will it take to receive the certification kit? There is a address confirmation process. You will receive an email from CompTIA that asks you to log in, confirm your address, and they send that to you. Some people have said they've got it in a couple of weeks. Other people have said it's taken more than a month. These probably go out in batches, I would imagine. So you'll need to just be patient. The certification kit is not as important as the certification itself. Once you can tell people you have the cert, you can download a copy of the certificate if you want. You can print it out. It's all available for you to do there. So I would recommend you have a look at that, but don't worry so much about how long that takes to get to you. Ultimately, you're certified the instant it pops up on the screen and says you passed. At that point, I think it takes about 24 to 48 hours for CompTIA to confirm that you really passed. But what there really is a chance for them to revoke the cert. They have a whole set of processes they use to confirm that the certification was obtained in a legitimate and ethical manner. And if they find something unusual with it, there is a chance that they might revoke it. That's incredibly rare, but it does happen. So that's one of those situations where you would have to talk to CompTIA to be able to figure that out. The vast, vast, vast majority of people, it takes 24 to 48 hours to see it show up on your online record in the CompTIA, your CompTIA login. You look in there, it will tell you whether it's pending or whether it's confirmed, and you'll know immediately. If you went through the proper channels, you studied the right way, you went to a legitimate test center, you took the exam and you passed it, you're certified the moment it says on the screen that you passed. Let's keep going through this list. I can probably get another question in before we're done. The questions that you see on the exam are many and varied. There's a lot of questions that have come up in this list that have talked about what should I expect on the exam. The exam, and I think this is why having a good set of practice exams is important. Hint, hint. Because I read through so many bad practice exams. People send me a lot of emails when there's a bad question on a bad practice exam. And I get the worst of the worst questions. And they say, what is this? What is this? They asked this. These were the answers. This has nothing to do with each other. Am I imagining this? What is the right answer, Professor Besser? And my answer is always, you need to go back and talk to the people that wrote this, because I can't help you with that. These badly written questions need to be presented to the people that wrote the badly written questions to see if they understand how badly written they are. But they generally do not. They generally just say that, well, that's the question and that's the answer. So I tell people all the time, find a good set to be able to work with, and you should be fine. There was a question in this list. Once you are certified, Ahmad says, after becoming certified, I have the certificate. Should I attach my certificate with the resume, even if the employers don't ask about it? Generally speaking, no, you would not. The employers are getting pages and pages and pages, or virtual pages, PDFs and PDFs and PDFs of all of these resumes coming in. They are being imaged and stuck into these systems that are evaluating the information that's on the page. They are grading your resume before a human even sees it. So you don't have to include any extra certifications. If they need verification of your certification, they will ask you for it. And there are methods within your CompTIA login that allows you to create a link for them to visit the CompTIA site and see your certification. Because to be quite honest, I could grab a picture of a certification off the internet, put it into Photoshop, and hey, I'm certified instantly. It doesn't work that way. So having the employer go to a third party who is trusted to be able to provide that certification information is relatively important. You providing it, it's kind of nice, but ultimately they don't need it. They're not going to look at it. It simply adds on more virtual pages for them to sift through, and they're not going to trust it anyway. They're going to want to get that information from a third party, and not because they don't trust you, but they don't know you, and they want to confirm that things that are in your resume are valid. There's a number of things they're going to be validating, and that's one of them. Make sure that you have a good list of that. The challenge I think that many people run into with submitting these jobs is you really want to highlight the things you have done. And that's why I have a couple of videos on this YouTube video description about 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. And I did a follow-up to that one of 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. And it talks about, what do you put on your resume? What goes at the top? What goes at the bottom? Do you have more than 1 page? How many pages should you have? And what should you even have a cover letter or not? And I think that's probably the one that would probably give you the best bang for your buck, mostly because I think most people dismiss the value of a cover letter. And it is one of the rare occasions where an employer would like to get a cover letter from you. Most people don't put one. And the people that do put a cover letter, it is the worst example of a cover letter you would ever find, because they don't want to have to write it over and over again. So the cover letters usually go something like, "Thank you so much for allowing me to submit this resume for your consideration. I think you will find the information in this resume matches your requirements, and I look forward to speaking with you as soon as possible. Sincerely." Just awful. Says nothing. Why did you even put a cover letter on that says that? Your cover letter is a marketing tool. It's a letter that allows you to highlight why this job is for you and why they should not even consider anyone else who has submitted their resume. And the one I recommend in my video is a T style. T, the letter T, the one that comes after S, the one before U. The letter T is the one you want to do. The T style cover letter is a great one, because what it effectively does is take what they've asked for in their job description, and it goes on the left side of the T. And in the right side of the T, you put how your particular qualifications match that particular requirement. So if you pick the top 4 or 5 things this particular employer wants, we're looking for people who are blah, blah, blah. We're looking for knowledgeable people in the world of this. We're looking for people that have a familiarity with this technology. I mean, they're spoon feeding you what they want. Well, great. I'll list out those 3 things, and I'll say, well, you asked for this. I have that. I have a certification in this and this, and have been working with these technologies for the last 5 years. We're looking for someone familiar with this type of thing. And you can explain why you are the right fit for that type of thing. So if you're having, that's a good argument. You've already made the argument for you having this job. You haven't even met these people yet. And I will tell you that people who are hiring managers, coming from a former hiring manager, I will tell you, we read through those cover letters. Most of them are awful. But if you suddenly find one that is giving you the reason why you need to have this position, we're going to want to talk to you. Let me get you into the rotation. Let me get you into the first round, the second round. We'll at least give you a chance, because you've now positioned yourself above and beyond other people. People seem to miss that point, that this is, whenever you're trying to get a job, this is not a competition between you and the employer. This is a competition between you and everyone else sending in a resume. And you need to be the one that is better than any of those people. Oftentimes, almost every time, there will be someone else in that fray of people vying for that same position who are better qualified than you. They have more experience than you. They've worked with technologies you have never worked with. And they're trying to compete for that same position. But you're hoping that that person, maybe they don't write well. Maybe they didn't include a cover letter. Maybe they don't work well in front of a camera for a Zoom call. Maybe they've never dressed up for an interview before. Even though they might be technically more knowledgeable and technically a better fit for that role, from a personality perspective, they don't get the same coverage that you might get, because you're doing all of these other marketing tasks, if you will, to get your face in front, to get your experience in front, to make them aware of the things that you have done. And that is the real difference. And it is missed by so many people. How many people have we got to see on Reddit that brag about sending out 200 resumes and I finally got that job? Like that's awful. Now, should you send out a lot of resumes? You should. But they sent out exactly the same resume to 200 positions. Of course it took you 200. Wouldn't it have been nice if it was only 100? Yes, the answer is yes. It would have been nice if it was only 100. If it was only 50. It'd been nice if that happened the first week. But did they update their resume? You can make 5-minute change to your resume that will customize it for that particular job. I talk about that in my videos. Did they include a cover letter with a T style? They did not. You did. So there are things you can immediately do before you've even started the process, really. The very first step is the way you would do that. And I think that's an important consideration. Is this, you have to be wily. You have to think about how you can be better than anyone else without knowing who they are, without knowing really who your competition might be, without understanding what your competition knows. You need to suddenly position yourself as so much better than them without maybe even having the same capabilities, the same functionality, the same knowledge as someone else. You might not be the best person for that role, but in your mind and the way you position yourself, you are the best person for that role. Why haven't you hired me already? If I write this way just for my resume, imagine the stuff I'm going to do for you as an employee. I mean, that's what you're trying to get across to the prospective employer. And I think it makes a big difference when you're trying to get that job that you suddenly position yourself differently, that you are different than someone else. And there's lots of things you could do. When we were working as systems engineers, if you've ever worked in a role in a company and someone's trying to sell you something, companies have been very good about how they do this. There used to be the remote control was one where we would FedEx a remote control to a CIO or CEO with a letter that says, we'd love to get 15 minutes of your time to tell you about our latest technologies, and we'll bring the portable television in that matches this remote control. I mean, those types of things. Or the one I see most recently today, we will bring in the drone that goes along with this remote control if we can get 15 minutes of your time. It's sort of buying time from the CEO, but it's just a cheeky way to get their attention, because you're not getting a lot of people FedExing a remote control to you, but they're trying to get you to give them a couple of minutes of that time. And if the 15 minutes don't go well, you know, it's no money out of the pocket of the salesperson. We got a stack of drones. Who's on our drone list today? Let's go talk to them for 15 minutes. Let's go take them to lunch. We'll take you to lunch. We'll give you the drone, and you have to listen to us for an hour. It's a good combo. It's a good switch to be able to have that there. And you can do similar things with your resume, but do it with your job posting. Do it with your cover letter. Do it with the information that's in your resume. Do it there so that you can have it there. A lot of people are in the chat room are even saying, well, what about the size of the resume? Some people have said, make it a page. Well, if it's an entry-level position in IT, 1 page is more than enough. They're not going to read through a couple pages for an entry-level IT position. And you probably don't have enough to put on a resume more than a page if it's an entry-level IT position. Once you get more into IT, you're in for a couple of years, you got a few jobs under there, 2 pages is good. No more than 2 pages, at least not in the US. No more than 2 pages. And I think you'll be fine. The challenge that people run into with jobs is just figuring it out. There's been a lot of information in the news lately about there's not any jobs out there. People aren't hiring. There's no jobs. But if you actually look at the job market right now for IT, it's about where it's always been. There's a lot of jobs out there. People are hiring for a lot of positions right now. So they're there. I think that people, and this kind of goes back to journalists. Why do I keep harping on the journalists? I don't mean to, but it's sort of where we are, is that the news loves the stories about layoffs. Recently, at the end of the year, last year, Cisco did a round of layoffs. They laid off 5% of their workforce or 7% of their workforce, whatever that number was. And in the news, it was the IT industry is failing and there's nobody's hiring and Cisco just laid off a bunch of people. Yeah, but if you look at a year ago from there, Cisco laid off 6% of their workforce. And if you look a year before that, Cisco laid off 7% of their workforce. And if you go a year back from there, Cisco they lay off 5% of their workforce every year. It's their policy. It's what they do as a corporation. They have one of those horrible corporate policies where they evaluate you every year. It's a competitive environment. And if you are in the bottom 5%, you get fired. They just do that every time because they are a heartless, soulless organization, just like every other large organization like that. They have no soul. They have no heart. They just dump you on the side of the road, and that's that. So it's one of those where as long as you know that's how they work, that's fine. You can expect that. In fact, you need to make sure that you're not one of those 5%. And that's sort of where companies like that are coming from. That kind of goes back into the 80s and how the management of the 80s, Cisco still has that management style of evaluate every year and throw out the bottom 5%. But that doesn't mean the industry isn't hiring. That just means Cisco is doing that. And Cisco's not the only one that does that. Twitter does that. The company formerly known as Prince does that. The Facebook does that. Everybody does this. That doesn't make it right because it isn't, but that's what they do. But that doesn't mean the whole industry is not hiring. There's actually quite a few jobs out there right now. If you go out to your favorite job posting site, lots of jobs out there for people with an A+, lots of jobs out there for people with the Network Plus, with the Security Plus. They're there. You just need to hunt around and find them and position yourself as the one who needs to get that job. You're the one who should be in that position, whether it is creating a unique resume for each job posting, it's creating those cover letters, or maybe you find other ways. I mentioned in my video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. I know I'm doing a lot of video discussion here of these videos I have, but not because the videos are there. It's because we're talking about those topics. I have a video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. And perhaps one of the biggest things you can do that has nothing to do with your IT knowledge is meeting people who already work in that company. And you can meet these people at a Cisco user group meeting, a Microsoft user group meeting, a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, a industry trade show, whatever it happens to be. You need to meet these people, because if we know that there's already a relationship, you're walking in the door and meeting with these folks. Oh yeah, I know Bob in your IT department. We go way back in the Cisco user group. He told me about this open position. I sent him my resume. What a great guy. He told me a lot about what you're doing with Project W and blah, 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 the imaging thing that you got going on, or the cloud-based storage thing you're working on. You now know a lot about this company already because you know people that work there. And because you know people that work there, they trust you more than someone who knows no one in the organization. So sometimes it's not about, we've heard this all the time, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. It's not exactly accurate. What it really should say, it's not just about what you know, it is also about who you know. And you have to have all of these different skills and knowledge and relationships to be able to position yourself best for those positions. So if you think that sending out 200 resumes without ever meeting anyone or customizing the resume is really the best use of your time, please go do that. But if you think sending out a much smaller number that's more directed, that's customized, and has a different strategy for how you get your foot in the door, I think that's a better direction to go. And ultimately, it positions you better over the longer term, I think. Now, a lot of people in the chat room even mentioning that and how that works. And it's sometimes, I mentioned to you, you might not be the most technically gifted person for this position. There may be other people applying for this position who are much more technical than you are. And I for this reason, I can speak from experience that last position I had as a systems engineer at this this crazy little startup called Palo Alto Networks that created this firewall that no one had ever seen before, that had technology that people couldn't even imagine was real. I went and interviewed for them, and they said, we don't think so. I mean, you're okay, but no, we got other people that are much smarter than you that we think we're going to hire for this. And it took a lot of lobbying to be able to turn them around on that. And in that particular case, I knew someone who was being hired for a different role within Palo Alto Networks, and they became a champion for me. They effectively got me that job because they were already trusted. They were the person that was hired. They were the person in the company that I knew. And they ended up hiring me over that other person. I don't know who it was. I don't know the details of that. All I knew is what they explained, that piece of it. But it's a really good example of how not just relying on your knowledge or just relying on a bunch of resumes being thrown somewhere is not your best and most applicable form of job hunting. I think using different skills and using them in a way that positions you better can get over some of those issues with other people coming in that may indeed be technically a little stronger than you are, but ultimately maybe they aren't just looking for smart. Maybe they're looking for something that's a little more well-rounded. Maybe they're looking for someone who learns a little better. Maybe they're looking for someone who doesn't have baggage that's coming in the door. You don't know until you meet with them and find out more about what they'd like to have, what they're looking for. And for me, fortunately, they said, yes, we'd like to hire you. And it was a great 7-year run at Palo Alto Networks, working with technology that no one had ever seen before, that was exciting, that was game-changing, that changed the industry. I was able to do things and go places I had never gone before. And that's what you want in a job. I wouldn't say that I would have done it for free, but it sure seemed like a lot of the time that how am I doing this job? How am I able to do this? This is fantastic. The things we saw and the stories we have and the people we met, which is probably the most important part, was the people we met. That was really the fun part of it. And I think that's what you should focus on as well, is it's more than just what's on the piece of paper. And you should start thinking that way in order to get that first job or get a better job within this industry. It will make a difference in the things that you are working towards. And ultimately, it'll make a difference in what you do throughout your entire IT career. It really, really will. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I want to thank everyone for joining us today for that first hour of Q&A. It's always fun to put that together and see how things turn out. That one was a little trickier than I thought. I'll try not to be quite as harsh on you next time, or maybe I will. We'll have to see. You'll have to tune in next time and see if that's the case. We do have a Network Plus study group next week. We'd love for you to come back. Stop by on Wednesday of next week. You can always find it in the calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar for our next live event. You can also find it in the events channel of our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. That's where I will be when we're done here, along with a lot of other folks that are already there studying for their certification exams. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We have such a good time doing these live streams, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you. If you like this video, it would make my day if you went over to professormesser.com/YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel and or give this video a thumbs up. We would really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.